Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mayor.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. I'd like to thank everybody for being here today. All the departments, all the directors, all of our staff. Thank you for your efforts as always. This is a workshop. This is not a public meeting, just so we're aware. This is a workshop. We're workshopping this amongst our team here in an effort to build the best budget, which addresses as many possible projects and needs in our community. I'd like to thank in advance our finance director, her department, her entire department for all their efforts, everybody in Capitol, our city manager, everyone that had a hand in putting together our capital improvement plan for 2024 through 2028. Thank you for your hard work, and we appreciate it. So moving forward, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor. Did you want to say anything?
Yes, please.
Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. Thank you, first of all, for all of your work in helping us to prioritize and to know the priorities of the city. And so as we go through today, we're going to be talking about the various projects that the city departments have put in requests for fiscal year 24. Before we do that, I want to go ahead and thank our staff as well, because it's not just myself. So I'm Paula Rodriguez, Assistant Finance Director for Budget. But I want to thank our budget staff. So Mitranan Pajacri and Pedro Sanchez and Elsie Fuentes. Elsie works on all of the millions of grants that we talk about. She spends a lot of time. Mitranan is our key person on capital, and Pedro also supports capital and all of our operating budget expenses. Diana Gomez, our finance director, who also always supports our staff, as well as the manager and the ACM, and all of the directors that are behind us that put in so many hours of work in helping us get good estimates and understand what's needed in the city. And so as we go through the projects today, this is really a labor of love from everybody in this room and those who are not in attendance. So we really appreciate all of that time, and it makes our job easier. So I'm going to go ahead and present to you a priorities list, which was sent out this morning and you have in front of you. We had one-on-one meetings with each of you to preliminarily discuss the requests that came from departments, those projects that are underway. And so I'm going to go through each one of these. At this point, we received our preliminary revenue amounts for next year, for next fiscal year 2024. And so we now have some preliminary estimates of what we believe and recommend should go to capital, that we can fund for capital. And we'll go through that information as well. So what I have here on the screen is what is in front of you. And I'm going to go through this workshop is for each one of you to discuss your priorities and to understand what funding is available and to discuss where funding should go to help us prioritize where funding should go. You're going to see on this spreadsheet, each of the projects is listed in column B. You're going to see some prior year available and open encumbrances for each of those projects. You're going to see the fiscal 24 requests. These are estimates based on departments. These are requests based on what departments have heard from the residents, the commission, administration of what's needed in future years. And then we also have planning for future years. What you have not seen before today is the funding section. And so this is where we really get into, I'll say, the nitty-gritty of what are the asks, what are the needs, and then where is the funding and what's available. And this is where we start to get into prioritizing how much can we put in one place or the other. And so we'll go through each one of these in detail. I just want to give you some understanding of the spreadsheet. You're going to see the last two columns is going to be what was recommended funding for 24 and what the shortfall for each project is. And I just want to be clear, this is our recommendation. We take the priorities that we hear from staff, we take the priorities that we hear from the dais, and what we understand from the city and what the priorities of the city are. If there is an item that is not funded, it is not because we don't believe that it is a need or important. It's just our first attempt at recommending where funding should go. This is your budget. We look to you now to tell us what your priorities are, where maybe funding should shift, or what else you feel is needed to be funded. The funding that we have right now is preliminary. There are revenue estimates that we receive over the summer, primarily from the state revenues. And so as we go through our budget process, we will refine those amounts, and this will not be final until you adopt it in your first and second budget hearing in September. Okay? Any questions on the process? Okay. So I'll go straight into the worksheet. And so first I'm going to give you a quick overview of the funding that's available. So our primary funding for capital comes from general capital. It's essentially funds from the general fund. So these are all our general fund operating budget and our general fund capital essentially come from the same types of revenue. So primarily property taxes, other fees and revenues that come into the general fund. And so I'll just highlight this real quick. So you'll see here that we are estimating to have $23.4 million available for general capital. Can everybody see that on the screen? Okay. And so that is $8.7 million of recurring funds. So we have worked over the years. So many of you have been through this process. Many of you are aware that capital was not a priority investment in the past. And so over the years, we have been working to establish reoccurring revenue into capital to make sure that we are maintaining our facilities, to make sure that we have funding available to address recurring expenses for capital. And so we have been building this fund to be able to absorb recurring projects. And so this year we have 8.7 in recurring funds. We have 1.3 million in one-time. So these should only be used towards one-time projects. This is not funds that we can count on for future projects. So we try to allocate that in a way that we're not counting on it for future years. We have another $4.9 million for one-time capital improvement funds, and about $800,000 that's coming in for the Alhambra Water Tower from insurance. Okay? So I'm going to hide that. We have AIPP funds, so Art and Public Places funds, and even though the fund does have more one-time monies, we are using that we are proposing to use that this year towards the public art matrix, so the maintenance of public art, towards the Whiteway lights, and towards Centennial Trail. Special revenues, so this is the city clerk's special revenue fund, and so this is being proposed to be used towards the renovation of that building, and it's from fund balance in that fund, and it is special revenue, so it's restricted to be used the same way that Art in Public Places has restrictions for certain maintenance of art. So is the city clerk's special revenue. We have a small amount in the Neighborhood Renaissance Program. This is the funding that you were discussing yesterday. This is roadway money, so local option gas tax. We're estimating 1.1 in new funding for '24, and a small amount, I think it's about 15,000 in fund balance. CITT, so CITT is the recurring funds for CITT are used to fund the operation of the trolley and the freebie. Their one-time funding comes from any fund balance, and we only propose to use that for one-time projects. So we do not take away from operating funds. This is anything that falls to fund balance, and we would only propose to use that for one-time projects that are transportation-related and eligible for CITT funds. So you'll see here that we're proposing to use about $500,000 in fiscal year '24. GOB, we have a pending interlocal agreement for GOB, and it's for the Centennial Trail. That's about $250,000, so that's here today. We are also proposing to use $245,000 from park impact fees, and you'll see, Mayor, when we get to that line, what we're proposing that for, but we currently have an unassigned fund balance of $245,000 that we're proposing to use next fiscal year. You all have had many discussions about stormwater and sanitary sewer, and so this as well is the projects that we are proposing to use comes from stormwater and sanitary sewer restricted funding. And so we'll go through the list of projects that are slated there. You'll also see them in blue on the spreadsheet in front of you. We do have some grant funds of about $1.1 million that we are also reflecting here for 2024. Parking projects, so parking projects can also be funded from the parking fund, and so we are proposing $1.2 million of projects from the parking fund this year, and we will go through those projects. And then motor pool. Motor pool is an internal service fund. This is for the replacement of vehicles, existing vehicles, not for new purchases. And that is part of our matrices. We have about 3.5. This is a very important program for us. We'll talk about it in the matrices, and we talked about it in the one-on-ones. We have done a very good job over the most current years of making sure that we're replacing our vehicles and keeping up our vehicles and our equipment, our heavy equipment. And so that requires about 3.5 a year. There's slight escalation costs, like everybody has seen in many other areas of different industries in that, but that's 3.5 in the next fiscal year. Okay, so if there's no questions, we're going to go through each of the projects and each of the areas and what we have recommended as funding. Again, if there is a project that is not fully funded or has not been proposed for funding here, it is not because we don't feel that it's important. I'm sure some of the departments looked a little side-eyed when they saw nothing in their fiscal year 24 funding, but you'll see that the $24 million in general capital, or the total of $42 million across all funds, is short, and I'm just going to scroll all the way down to the bottom real quick, of our $62.3 million ask for fiscal year 24. So this is where the decisions happen, right? This is where the magic happens. So some of the projects, or most of the projects, have future year funding. I'm going to hide these columns just so that it'll be easier to present. All the way to the 5-year total.
While you're doing that, I got a quick question. You have an asterisk on line 260, citywide septic to sewer conversion assessment, and I don't see a footnote anywhere indicating what that asterisk means.
The footnote might be out of the print area, but it is, you'll notice that in that section, the only item, so this is the utility section, primarily funded, or 99.9% funded from stormwater and sanitary sewer. The citywide septic and sewer conversion is an item that cannot be funded from stormwater or sanitary sewer. We cannot fund any new connections to the system. We can only fund items that are within the system already. So it's actually a requirement. So the ask of $187,500 has to be funded from other funds outside of the sanitary sewers or stormwater.
So that's what the asterisk means?
That's what the asterisk was intended to denote, yes. I will make sure the next version has the footnote.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So if there's any questions on future year funding on any project, I can then expand and we can get into that detail. Okay, so I'm going to start from the top. So the first section, highlighted in gray, these are our ongoing recurring matrices. And so these are matrices programming for funding that the commission has adopted each year. It's within our operating budget book. They've been established now. Most of them have been established for a few years. You're going to see here that our total ask for these matrices is $11.2 million. We always recommend that this is prudent, that we always fund these matrices and that we try to fund them to the full extent as possible. I have, for the purposes of making funding available for other priorities, I have funded the general items at 95% of the ask. If through the summer we have more funds, my recommendation would be to fund these at 100%. because they are items that this is funding that we use to maintain our facilities, to replace our vehicles, to replace rifles, so we can go down the list. So network infrastructure, this is a critical item to the city. I think we're all aware at this point how important cybersecurity, how important the maintenance of our IT systems, all of our networking is to the city or to any organization. And so this is 2.1 that we are proposing to be funded towards that 2.2 ask of our maintenance replacement of IT systems. Public art restoration. This is one that we are proposing that gets funded from Art and Public Places, and so the ask is $52,000. Art and Public Places has the funding to fund it, so we propose funding it at the full ask. Citywide roof replacement matrix. So again, this is funding that goes not to specific projects, but to a pot of a savings account based on the useful life of each of our pieces of facility. And so the citywide roof replacement plans to replace a roof at the end of its useful life. And so again, we always recommend funding these at.
Quick question.
Yes.
When you say prior year available, is that what's currently available or was available at the beginning of this fiscal year?
That is what is currently available. What is in an open PO is what is encumbered today, or most recent update sometime between March and today. And then the ask of 569 for next year. And so the 569 is based on a matrix which takes the number of roofs that we plan to replace and the useful life of each roof, so whether it's 10 years, 15 years, or 20 years, and then it calculates what we need to fund each year to set aside money, to have money available. And so many times on any of these projects, the department directors are here, they can always speak to what's underway, the status of projects, and where that prior year available is. Many times at this point of the year, they're still in procurement or they're still in design, and so they may not have encumbered construction money, and so or maybe that 1.6 isn't sufficient to do the program that they have, and they need the additional 500,000 or 200 of this to actually start a project. And so that prior year available balance we can always discuss in detail.
Mr. Manager, good morning. So she's talking about roofs. Give my colleagues an example of a roof system that we've done here in the city recently and how much the price has gone up.
For instance, we did City Hall.
So the reason why I'm asking is because the question is, where's the money? Where's the money, right? It's been the constant question, where's the money, where's the money? When we budgeted for City Hall, what was the number we budgeted for 2 years before, would you say?
The City Hall roof, for instance, it's $600,000.
Okay.
And the reason we have this matrix fund is because of that, so that we can maintain this building. We know that we have to do work. The idea was to stabilize the building. How do we stabilize the building? Remove the water infiltration. We still have the cupola, the tower to do, but that was a way to stabilize the building and allow us some time to get future funding to restore the entire building.
But my point is, for example, 2 years ago, we budgeted for a roof system. When we finally were able to put the money aside, actually start the procurement process, go out to get a roofing contractor and get prices that jumped 30, 40, and 50% outside of the numbers that we had allocated in that silo, for example, roofing.
Yes.
So when you see projects here that the monies are being put aside, the last 2 years have been an anomaly in regards to construction, labor, design, in regards to the pricing. So a lot of these projects that we wanted to do for 50% less ended up obviously ballooning to a significant amount of money as a result of just the inflation and the cost of construction, the cost of labor. So it puts us behind the 8 ball significantly when you want to attack as many projects as possible in capital, but you can't because there's only so much money to go around.
Construction has been, the CPI increase is negligible compared to the construction costs have gone up. It's gone up probably 5 to 10 times as much. We have projects have gone up 50, 60%. That is not a inflation index. This is we stopped the world for 2 years and we're restarting. So we are behind. This is escalation. As you mentioned, Mayor, you're in construction, you know exactly what is going on here. Projects such as Firehouse 4 have gone up tremendously that we could not plan for. We could deal with inflation. We deal with inflation from 5 to 9%. But how do we deal with 50, 60% increase?
Have we provided the final numbers for Firehouse 4?
We have some. I hate to say final because
I know.
it's difficult to say what the bids are going to come
Well, I
in
mean, you
at.
don't want to say final because the firefighters just keep doing public records requests every time that I say the actual number of what the cost is. But the numbers, just so you know, have gone from when we started having a conversation of $4.5 million, $4.5 million, right? Was it
4.5 million
4.5 million?
to almost 9 million.
We're gonna get. And by the way, when we finish the building with all the trimmings,
Plus, of course, we have the
all the
additional
trimmings,
cost of design, et cetera.
furniture, design, soft costs, IT. You're talking about this is gonna go well over $10 million.
It is. It's been incredible. I hate to say final, Mayor, because I don't. The bidding process right now is so skewed. It's hard to say what we're going to get, and there's a bidding war for materials, which hasn't happened since 1980, and so it's very speculative right now.
To give you an idea, concrete per yard is between $150 to $200. These are historic numbers that you've never seen in my industry.
I've never seen that.
You've never seen it. And they're not going down, they're only going up. They're only going up. So I'm talking about this today because people who are listening, they say, where's the money? Where's the money? Where's the money? Wait a minute, you had 40 million and you wanted to do all these projects, you only were able to do half. Well, that's why I've always said, the purpose of today's workshop, and correct me if I'm wrong, the purpose of today's workshop is to educate the commission, educate the community, and then ask, when is our next meeting?
July 12th, I believe.
Okay, so July 12th, I want everybody to come back here with ideas on how to fund these projects. The status quo of just putting up your hands and saying, hey, listen, it is what it is, we're gonna take staff's recommendations, that's not the way this works. We gotta figure out ways, either in Tallahassee, like we did last year with $4.5 million, when we normally get $1 million, either going to Washington with an earmark for a project. Everybody here needs to do their part and find the money. Because if we come back here and we just vote on a budget in regards to capital projects, and we have not put in our 2 cents to deliver, for example, case in point, yesterday's almost $800,000 for the gondola building, I think we will have failed. Because there's a lot of statements that were made about, you know, we have to address historic preservation projects. We have to address the Venetian pool. We have to address the country club. But I remember being on the seat with my colleagues here and getting a call from the manager and saying, hey, listen, the roof is shot in the country club. The pool needs to be refinished. All these things need to be redone. We don't have the money for it. Where are we going to get the money from? Remember those conversations, Mr. Manager?
Yes, ma'am.
Millions of dollars. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Roof is over $1 million.
Over $1 million roof. And these things came out of nowhere. And we had to deal with those issues at that moment and find the money. So I'm asking my colleagues, this is a wonderful presentation. It's beautiful. Been doing this for 10 years. I think it's great.
Yes.
But the idea of coming back, this is just a template that is given to the commission for then the commission to work with the manager and staff to find more money. How do we find more money? At the state, at the federal level, P3, hiring companies that can lowering costs that are to the company, to the country, to the city, finding new ideas on how to do something. That's what I hope today we come out, because when you look at what we have in regards to capital needs, we fall very, very short in regards to the money that we have available to meet all these needs.
Yes, and two very important points to what you said and to the commissioner's question. One, all of those rising costs, and that makes this planning even more important,
Yes.
right? So this section that we're talking about, these are essentially savings accounts. So we put aside money towards roofs each year to make sure that when it's time to replace a roof, that we have money set aside. That roof may come in 20% more than we thought, but the ask in that year, or the amount of money that we'll need to find in that year, will be less, as if we wouldn't have put any money aside. The second thing is.
But if I may, can I add something to that?
Yes,
if I
of
may?
course.
And this is where I take offense after being here for 10 years and having worked on this, and I know my colleagues do too. And that is staff was the one that said, let's sit down with the commission. I don't know how many years ago was it when we started doing these buckets?
Many years ago now, less than 10 years ago
I was
now.
here. I was here. I just don't remember the exact year, and I don't want to. There's so many public records requests flying every day that I want to make sure I get it correct, that you answer, not I. So
We can get that date for you.
yeah, nonstop. So, there's so many statements that are made that staff doesn't plan properly, that we're not planning for a rainy day, that we're not being careful. I want you to highlight, and that's why I'm stopping your presentation, to really highlight the fact that we are saving for a rainy day, not only in regards to our finances, but also to make sure to address capital needs. Are any other cities doing what we're doing to this magnitude?
There are cities who do have these programs, but not to this magnitude. We are one of the cities that has the highest reserves, that make sure to put aside the most percentage of funds to make sure that we are covered, which is why we are a AAA bond rated city and why we are so favorable in the eyes of those rating agencies.
But what I'm talking about is, for example, and I'll give you an example. Okay, there's a roof issue. Are other cities doing what we're doing in regards to saving tranches of money in that bank account, or are they more? They're not as proactive as we are. They're more reactive. Correct? They have an issue, and your staff is shaking their head because I
Yes,
know what the
there are
answer
many.
is.
Yeah.
We're one of the few
We are
cities
one
that
of
does
few
it.
cities who really program our funds and are able to put aside funds and plan in this manner. Yes.
To the residents, this has been going on for 7 years. This has not been going on this year. It's been going on for 7 years, and it is the credit to the manager and to staff, because this has been planning so that when you walk in here today, there is millions of dollars that are ready to be spent. And that's my 2 cents for the workshop. I want to say thank you again.
Thank
And
you.
please continue, unless my colleagues want to address it.
My second most
No, just
important.
hadn't finished my question.
Go ahead.
You finish it? No problem. That's a part of our
I'll defer
workshop.
to the commissioners.
Just to finish my question, so the open PO is not taken into account in previous year available?
Right.
So the actual available is less?
The available is 1.1. What is in a purchase order now is 800,000.
Okay.
If I was to close that PO, you would have 1.9 available. So what?
Got it. So the 817 has already been taken out
Of the 1.1,
Okay, all right.
yes.
That was my question.
Another-
That was my
so
question.
the
Okay.
second
Because I
important-
was trying to figure out the numbers, and I was like, I can't
Yes.
figure out if it is or if it is not.
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
perfect. Thank you.
It takes a minute to get acquainted with the spreadsheets.
you.
The second point that is very important is that we are in the
The Vice Mayor
process
has
of
a question.
preparing
The Vice
our
Mayor.
July.
The Vice Mayor has a question.
So,
Vice Mayor
I
Anderson.
actually have one question and one challenge. City Manager, you mentioned except for the cupola regarding City Hall building. Does that mean that the roof on the cupola was not redone?
We're working on stabilizing the cupola right now. Everything else has been stabilized.
So was the roof portion of the cupola replaced?
I don't believe we have the cupola done.
Huh?
I think that's the only thing pending.
That's the only thing pending. Okay, so we need to take that into
I have
account.
to take a look at that. That's a small area, and I know that we spent over 600, almost 680,000, almost
So the-
on the roof area and the flat roof area. And we're looking at waterproofing the wall, the louvers, and the roof.
Okay, priority. Got to stop the water from coming in. The challenge is to find grant funding, my friends. I'm going to identify as much as I can, but then we also need help in, getting them processed. Just to identify them is one thing. I'm not a grant writer. Are you a grant writer? Any of you?
I've reviewed applications, but not a grant writer.
I worked with grant writers
There you go.
in the past.
Okay.
So if you don't mind, regarding federal and state dollars, as the mayor mentioned, the city's done a great job, especially the last couple of years, of getting state dollars through the legislative process in Tallahassee, appropriations. But, since I've come on board, I've talked about accessing, being more effective, more efficient in Washington and Tallahassee, because there are other funding sources there. When I worked my almost 13 years at the city of Miami, they had a grants department that all they did was dedicated every day to finding every possible dollar in Washington, D.C., every possible dollar in Tallahassee, things that were under the radar. And my impression is that our overworked departments, our overworked staff, executive level directors and assistant directors are perhaps tasked with that, when other cities and even the county, I'm sure, has people just from the moment they open their eyes in the morning to the time they close their eyes at night, experienced and with a great track record of getting dollars. And I remember we were there, we got dollars to fix roads in Coconut Grove, whole bunch of, amazing things. And these were people that are experts in that area and have all their time focused on that. And I don't know exactly the details of how we go about it, but if we're in need of dollars, sometimes you spend a little bit more on the front end, but you're going to get a great return on the back end. So I'd like to see if maybe we can find a way to dedicate more time and greater expertise in finding those dollars that some of us don't even know are out there.
And to answer the question, Commissioner, a number of years ago, we included a federal lobbyist. So now we have two state lobbyists and a federal lobbyist to try to acquire those funds. City of Miami is a city about 10 times our size, so they have it's a little bit different from a federal perspective. However, we have the finance department does a fantastic job, and we actually have federal lobbyists and state lobbyists. Our state lobbyists also work at the county level to try and acquire all these funds. The commission, through the mayor, has done a great job in Tallahassee in acquiring. We bought really record levels of money, and we are very carefully assessing what we can do at a federal level. Remember, our size is 48,000, but whatever is available for a city of our size that we can go for, we actually go for.
My only concern or my only hesitation is that I worked with, a great many federal and state lobbyists as part of my duties at the city of Miami. And they too are pulled in different directions. And often what they're dealing with are, state bills, legislations coming from Washington, D.C. But in terms of digging deep, in terms of finding, accessing, helping us write the applications for the grants, that kind of nitty-gritty kind of detailed work, I don't think federal and state lobbyists are spending all their time looking for those opportunities for us. They're spread thin, and usually they're focused on some of the bigger items that are trying to, the legislation that tries to preempt local government. So, like I'm saying, I know we're smaller than City of Miami, so maybe we get a percentage of what they are able to find. But I think we should look into being more effective, efficient, and finding a way where we can have at least somebody totally dedicated to finding those dollars. The rest of us don't even know are there. That's just my take.
Thank you, Commissioner. And in our office, we do have somebody who does work on grants. I will agree with you that the availability of grants increases and decreases throughout the years. And so right now, grants are very prolific and they are available. So yes, our office is tasked with chasing after many of those grants. And so we are working within our office also to refine how we address that process and to better be able to look for grants we have some grant writing services, so we do sometimes look outside of our staff to be able to assist us with that in areas like LMS, where somebody might be more specific and technical and that can help us write those grants. One of our challenges, as you know, is not only the size of our city, right, but the financial stability of our city. So it works for us and it works against us. Many times the federal grants look favorable on us, but they also say, well, a city in need or an area in need may get a preference for a grant rather than the city of Coral Gables. But that doesn't stop us. We still put in our requests. We still work very diligently. But we agree that we can always be chasing more, and we appreciate your assistance at those levels, because it does go a long way when they see a commission and a city involved and concerned about the needs of the citizens. And so it does go a long way when you
For
make that
instance,
effort as
Commissioner,
well.
from infrastructure perspective, we were trying to get quite a large grant for the mobility hub. I presented to the FDOT, and I presented to various commissioners. We are going for the available grants that we can get for our size. Right. Some of them we're excluded from some. Some go straight to the state.
Sure.
Some may include the state and the county, but anything that we can access, we actually go for.
So if you don't mind in the future, maybe, after September or whatever, if perhaps we can have a short presentation on how you all work in that area, what you've pursued, what you've been able to acquire, and also so that we're more aware of what you all offer. Because when we make decisions, if we understand how you all do your work, then it better ties to what we're pursuing. So I think if we can do a presentation at some point down the road, I think it'd help all of us.
Certainly, we will definitely plan to do that.
And to piggyback off of Commissioner Menendez's suggestion, there are consulting firms also that the city currently employs. I know Public Works has gotten some grants through consulting firms. Do we engage any consulting firms specifically for finding grants for the city?
We have consulting firms, and we engage them as necessary when these grants are available, yes.
But not to actually seek out grants? Because there's also private sector grants for historic preservation, for landscape, for these types of projects that we may qualify for as well.
Yeah, and so we have in the past used consulting firms. One of the things that we're constantly weighing is the investment to the payoff. And so
Correct.
many times the grants that they're searching out are ones that we are not competitive for. And so sometimes we put in a lot of effort and dollars on the front end, and then, so we're constantly weighing that advantage, but it is something that it is a tool in our box that we think of from time to time, and we do have that. We recently had that discussion. Do we put in the investment? Do we think that this grant is going to make the payoff? Sometimes we take the risk, sometimes we get it, sometimes we don't. But right now, we have not used, this year, we haven't used any consultant to search for, but we have used grants writing services, and they have been successful. So if we find it and we need the support in writing and the technical expertise, the departments do a great job of supporting us, but they are sometimes tasked with multiple things. And so the grant writing services really does help us and give us a leg up, because sometimes they know that those specific terminologies, those words to drop into the applications. And so we're constantly weighing that.
And one of the things that we push with the lobbyists quite a bit is get us what is available out there, and that's very important. We had that for a number of years. I'm not sure it wasn't as effective as we expected, but our lobbyists are pushed to make sure that when there's an available amount, when there's an available grant or available monies coming up, that we're ahead of the curve, and we've gone in and gone after that money when it was a grant that was available to us, or wasn't something that was going to be state distributed. And if it's state distributed, then we go after the state to get some money from that.
I think one example is a septic to sewer, correct? That came through our lobbyists as a last minute thing.
So while I'm a fan of grants and grant writers, I'm more a fan of doing the work myself. So this is about going to Tallahassee 4 or 5 times a year. This is about going to Washington, like we've done. This is about building relationships with elected officials, department heads, sitting down with your staff, with our very competent staff, understanding the projects, taking a full team, sitting down with the departments, spending days in Washington, spending days in Tallahassee, and investing as much time as possible to make sure that when you submit for 8 projects, we got 7 projects funded. Now, do we pass a veto pen? That's still, we have to see where we stand. But at the end of the day, if you can tell me that we submitted 8 projects and we got 7 funded, I'll take it year over year. Because as our lobbyists have told me, Vince, there's no other city that gets that many projects funded. You can even look around, no other city gets that. So grant writers are great, a lot of empty promises. To me, it's all about relationships. It's about building a strong bond with the elected official at the state level. It's about having a real relationship, not a political relationship, a real relationship with that person, meeting with them, taking them to lunch, taking them to breakfast, taking them to dinner, building a relationship so that when your project comes up for funding, that they do everything in their power to work with our lobbying team to ensure that they can explain and justify why this project is important. One of the things that we've been hindered here in the city for a long time, and Commissioner Menendez and the Vice Mayor can explain, something that we say every single time when we go up there over the last 2 years is do not penalize good behavior. Reward good behavior. What do I mean by that? That's why I highlight our financing strategy, how fiscally sound we are, the efforts that we take, our triple bond rating, that we're not spending money that is allocated for 10 years in the future through reckless bond issuance, through raising taxes, the fact that we have the second lowest millage rate for a full-service city in Miami-Dade County. These are things that we harp on with every single person that we meet with. It's either the Senate President, it's either the Speaker of the House, or when we meet with the governor. And these are all the type of meetings that we have, and they're taken aback when we talk to them about how the city has put themselves in a very positive financial situation by being very fiscally thoughtful and careful.
Yes.
That is what that's what I'm investing my time in. I'm investing my time with these elected officials so that when it's time to cut the budget at the state level, they think twice before they cut the city of Coral Gables because we're doing things the right way.
By the way, I agree with the mayor. We've done a great job on appropriations,
Right.
especially at the state level. But there's a whole different world with regards to grants. And lobbyists do a great job helping us with the appropriations. Grant, based on my experience, is very much more technical, and you have to qualify based on, so when the presentation comes at some point, I'd like to focus on the grants because I agree, we're doing a great job on appropriations, but grants is a world that I just want to make sure we're tapping into on that end. So I
Certainly.
agree with the mayor on
Yeah,
appropriations.
may I say something, Mayor?
Yeah, of course.
Yes. Commissioner, for instance, yesterday I just signed a grant for EV charging.
Yep.
For 2.2 million, and that just went out yesterday. So we are on top of these things and trying to get as much money as our city can for all these. That was for EV, 2.2 million. I just signed that yesterday, and we'll see if we can, and we'll see what happens then. But one of the things that we really ask our lobbyists to look at is grant funding, and try to get as much of that money to our city as possible from the state, from the county, and from the federal level.
Because Commissioner Menendez, at the end of the day, like you said, grant funding is important, but our lobbyists are the ones that are going to meet, like I met with, they introduced me to the finance director who's in charge of all the finances and the budget for the governor's office. We sat down with him. That was one of the visits that we did when we went to Tallahassee, because we wanted to make sure that we, again, made it very, very clear, because the governor has a lot of meetings throughout the day, probably meeting with 30, 40 different groups and people. We wanted to meet with a person who is speaking with the governor when he's about to veto things and say, listen, I reviewed all these are sound investments in our tax dollars. So I'm all for grant dollars and everything. I just think that, to me, I want to be careful how we spend every single dollar. I know you do too. I want to be very, very careful, and I'd rather invest in ensuring that when our appropriations come up, that we're hitting on all cylinders, and that we fall to the veto pen or to some sort of misinformation in regards to what we're doing here in the city in regards to our finances.
Thank you, Mayor. So for today's meeting, one of the important points to remember is that we are in the process of preparing our July 1 estimate. And so we are obligated to prepare a July 1 budget book. And so based on the information that we discussed today, this estimate, there may be some refining between here and July 1. We're still balancing some numbers as we go through the process, but our July 1 estimate will reflect the discussions of today's meeting and the funding that we are putting towards capital as of July 1. As I've stated before, that will get refined over the summer, and you'll have a new estimate for our proposed in our first hearing in September, and we'll talk through those over the summer. You'll get more information, but for July 1, we will have had some decisions made that will go into a estimate and a budget book that we will have on July 1. So today's meeting is very important that we get your direction, and if there's anything that you feel needs to be addressed before that July 1 estimate, that we address it here today.
Well, thank you. Based upon our enormous interruptions of you,
Yes.
since
So
I have a lunch meeting scheduled that I may need to move, what's your estimated time needed to finish this?
So what I would like to do is if there's no, so my estimated time is you have as much time as you need to speak. I know that you have an engagement, and so last year, I think we did this meeting in about 3 hours. And so if we can go through the sections of the projects, we don't have to go through each one of them. And then we can kind of determine where we land. We can always come back for conversation on a specific comment if you'd like, okay?
Okay, thank you.
So the matrices sections, like we talked about, these are essentially savings accounts that we set aside funding to make sure that we have the funds available for the replacement and maintenance of certain equipment and capital facilities throughout, for future years and throughout the fiscal year. And so if there's not any questions specific to any of these matrices, I can go through them quickly. You have the network infrastructure matrix, public art restoration matrix, citywide roof replacement we spoke about. HVAC is in here, right? So important to make sure that we're planning to replace that equipment. Elevators, entrances and fountains. You can see here that it's something that we've put little money towards, but we did a rehab a few years ago. We put a significant investment into those entrances and fountains, and so this is to make sure that we continue maintaining those. Fleet replacement matrix we spoke about. Improvements to city parking lots and garage maintenance matrix. This actually does include 3 or 4 particular lots that have been priorities of the commission and administration, and so that is the ask for next year, and that gets funded from the parking funds. Parks replacement matrix, and so this is the matrix for parks. So many of the conversations that we've had of items that have to be done in parks are maintenance. This is not enhancements. This is just maintaining, replacing existing equipment, existing items within the parks. And so we typically fund this about 1.9. This year, we're proposing 95% of that 1.8. Radio system replacement matrix, same concept. This is putting aside money each year. We recently, about 7 years ago, did a full replacement of the radio system, and so this is that same concept of savings to making sure that we are constantly replacing this, those components of the system. Police rifle replacement matrix, same concept. This is for replacing existing, this is not for enhancement. And fire equipment replacement matrix. And so the total from the general fund that we are proposing is 6.3. Again, that's about 95% of each of those programs. Funding from AIPP and parking and motor pool to fund their respective items. So I'm going to go to the next section. So this section, again, we have this labeled as priority projects funded in fiscal year 23. So last year around this time, the conversation was around having to go out for debt for Firehouse 4 and for City Hall. And so thankfully over the summer last year, we were able to recognize the increase in property values, the additional revenues that we anticipated for fiscal year 23. And again, we are always going to recommend conservative budgeting. We want to make sure that we are not counting our ducks before they hatch, right? So last year, we had an increase of 7.9% in property values, unprecedented number for us. This year, we all know that the property values, again, unprecedented number. And so last year, our recommendation was that we set aside $5.5 million of that recurring money and put it into capital. That our recommendation is always not to continue building the operating budget because that is recurring and it's much more difficult to take away from operating than it is to not fund a project if a need were to arise, if something was to happen. And so last year, the commission prioritized $5.5 million to go into this 5-year plan and to fund these priority projects that you all had designated as priorities for the city. Not that other projects aren't, but to get these done quicker, things that needed to be done in the more immediate future. And so, again, it's a plan. The plan was always to do these projects in 5 years, and so we infused that into $5.5 million into these projects, and you'll see here City Hall complex improvements. The plan anticipated putting $1.5 million towards City Hall for fiscal year '24. I'm going to skip over the Venetian Pool. Alhambra Water Tower was one of those priority projects, and so we put money towards it in fiscal year '23, and we plan to put future money in. The gondola building was fully funded, anticipating that grant that we just approved yesterday, and so that project is now fully funded as part of that 5-year plan. Ponce Circle Park has 2 phases. Phase 1 is the one that we all know about. Phase 2 is a future plan that is not considered for funding in '24, but I'll unhide the out years, and you'll see that we're considering it for future years. And Phillips Park was part of this 5-year plan, and the plan was to provide funding, and maybe it's appropriate for me to unhide this at this point, to provide funding in both '24 and '25 and fully fund Phillips Park by fiscal year '25, and the development of Firehouse 4. And so I'm going to go back to Venetian Pool quickly. And so Venetian Pool, we had funded and was fully funded in the plan in fiscal year '23. However, due to increased costs and some structural needs that we identified throughout this fiscal year, Venetian Pool needs another $1.1 million for the construction. And then I'll jump, go ahead.
I'm going to say the Venetian Pool floor needs to be completely replaced. It's beyond repair, and that's why the increased costs were. The prior costs were to do some replacement, but it's really beyond. It needs to be restored completely.
And then Firehouse 4 also was fully funded in fiscal year '23, and due to some escalations in costs, we need just a little bit more funding to finish off that project and make sure that it's fully funded in fiscal year '24.
Firehouse 4 is in procurement. We plan on bidding that project soon,
When do you think we'll break ground, sir?
probably at the end of the year, because we are in procurement now. We have to receive bids. We're going for a lump sum for a direct contract on that, construction contract on that, and so we probably should be 3 or 4 months in procurement.
Do you have a construction fence up already or no?
Not yet, Mayor. It's currently being used. We didn't want to, since it's used as a parking lot that we're actually making money on, we're going to put the fence up as late as possible to.
I would like for you, if you can, to have a conversation with my colleagues. I would like to get that project started sooner rather than later. I think it's important. It's a public safety matter, and it's time to get that project started. It's time.
Plans are done. Plans are permitted. So we're really ready to go.
Okay.
It's now, by the way, the plans are permitted. So we have a fully permitted plans to go out for bids.
I want to see where these bids are coming in at. And I want to make sure that, again, we always have the most qualified bidders, as always, but I want to make sure that we can bring in the biggest pool possible so that we can hopefully get the best price
It's going
possible.
to be an interesting, we'll see how the bids come out. With the market the way it is, it's going to be interesting to see what the bids come in. However, it's a fully finished set of drawings and permitted.
Yep. Thank you.
What can we do to expedite on our end?
Oh, no, now when you go, now it's not about the plans, or it's not about the permitting. That's done. Now what you need to do is you need to, I don't want to speak for the procurement director, but we can talk about this is what I do every day. Coming up, so we can answer this together. Basically, what you need to do right now is you need to build a scope. You need to build a scope, prepare a package for an RFQ, depending if you're going to go an RFQ or RFP process. It looks to me like we're heading down a hard bid lane, correct?
Hard bid.
We're heading in a hard bid lane. So what we're gonna look at right now is trying to cast the widest net so we get the most qualified contractors. And we have to make sure that something that I worked on with you many years ago was to ensure that we had contractors that did not have any, they were not marred in legal, or not marred in legal issues or lawsuits with other cities or private entities. And we also have to make sure that these are contractors that are focused and have expertise in building these type of buildings or structures. I'm not gonna go and build a high-rise building. That's not what I build. You know, that's not my bread and butter. But we need to find entities that feel comfortable in building this project. Then try to get as many as we can. I think that'll probably take you a few months to put together.
Correct. So,
Package, and then probably the construction will probably give them what, 4 to 6 weeks to bid it out.
Mayor, I want to give them a little more time.
Yeah.
Because right now, you know how the bids are.
Of course.
So I want to make sure that we get some good subs and good bidding for the
the city
for
manager
DCs.
asked that we have it out at least 45 to 60 days.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's it. 6 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks. And then you will have probably maybe 100 RFIs that will be submitted, requests for information.
Don't say that.
You will, no matter what. They always ask questions because they try. I mean, this is what I do. They try to find out how to. Again, they offer different opportunities for constructability analysis, value engineering, VEs. They try to find ways to bring down the project cost to make them more competitive. That's hopefully the goal, because we're dealing with good contractors. And then what ends up happening is you have to answer all those RFIs. And then someone's going to say, listen, I haven't been able to get a steel price, or the following items are taking way too long in procurement. And they may ask for an extension. So you may end up with a 2-week extension or 3-week extension, depending. And you want to grant that extension at the end of the day because you want to get as many people to participate, competitive bidders who are qualified. So it's going to take time. There's no way to expedite the process, because then you
Tentatively,
end up
my
with a bad
staff
week.
just sent me a timeline, and we're looking to bring it to you probably at the end of September, if not October, realistically.
And then you hit the market, and then the bids come in, and you got to qualify the bids, and then you got to choose the most responsive bidder who meets all the criteria as per the city. Did I hit on the head or no?
Absolutely, 100%.
Did I miss anything? Because you're the expert.
You got it.
Realistically, there's no point in the conversation
Nope.
to get it expedited anyway, so.
But I wanted to put on the record because then people say that I didn't.
No, because
Not really.
he
And then,
said
in the,
that
and then,
manager
and then
should
in the
talk to
public,
us.
and then in the
He
public
laid it
records
out for
request
you.
that
Right.
comes, they say that I didn't answer the question and that I wanted to give you my full understanding of the process, and I'm not the expert. You are the expert. I just submit the bids to people like you.
One of the things that we have done is to maximize the bidding process as far as, in our favor, is have a fully permitted set of drawings. And also give the bidders now time. There needs to be time now. Getting bids from different subs it's a problem.
Suppliers in certain
Suppliers-
trades are very difficult. It's very hard to get structural numbers right now. Very hard.
The Menorca garage, we ordered some things a year and a half ago to get them now.
Electrical switchgear is taking a year to come in, even
We
longer.
ordered it over a year ago, Mayor, and just
By the way, I'm happy you brought that up. I'm happy you brought that up because if your team hadn't ordered that a year ago, the building would have been finished and we wouldn't be able to occupy the building because we wouldn't be able to electrify the building. So that's a testament to your staff, to the Public Works Department, to the Capitol, everybody who put that together, because you had the foresight to say, let me order this equipment. And it's not common. People are going to say, well, that happens. That's not the common place to order that far in advance.
we have to think, in today's world, we have to think ahead. It's very difficult times. That normally a 3-month delivery.
Normal.
On that, it's now 15 months.
Yeah.
Now 15 months.
Thank you.
Thank you. So back to the 5-year plan. So in order for us to maintain the 5-year plan, what we recommend is that we add about $1.9 million to the critical projects in order to fully fund the Venetian pool and the Firehouse 4 development, in order not to impact that plan. It also is conservative for us to now set aside an additional 1.1, right, in addition to the 5.5 set aside last year, and put that towards capital. That's new revenue that we anticipate in '24 and ongoing. And so that also allows us to move those projects along. And so I've gone ahead and expanded the future years so that you can see how that impacts that plan. And so by adding 1.1 million, I would add 1.9 and 24 to make sure that Firehouse 4 has everything that it needs. And then I would recommend recurring, including 1.1 at least into these critical projects, which would allow us to fully fund City Hall complex by 27, fully fund the Alhambra Water Tower in 25. Those future year amounts that you see is us starting to plan for a matrix for ongoing maintenance of that facility, because we know how expensive it is to maintain that facility. And so that 150 in future years is for us to begin to start building a matrix in future years. That would be our recommendation. And so then in 25, we would also finish funding Phillips Park. 26, completely fund City, use that money towards City Hall completely, unless there's another priority that comes up. And in 27, finish City Hall and begin the Pond Circle Phase 2. This is just our recommendation for future years. If there are other critical projects that the commissioners want to build into this program, in future years, those monies would be available and set aside for those types of projects. And so you could pull in something like the museum, the Miracle Theater, those other facilities that you feel are necessary.
Pond Circle Park Phase 1 is starting in September. The majority of that funding is coming from the Plaza project.
And also the funding for the project that addresses the North Ponds District, the medians, that's starting this year too, correct?
Yes, and we've got substantial grant funding for that.
So in regards to Phillips Park, because I know that was very near and dear to Commissioner Menendez, that's an $8 million line item, correct? How many is that?
About 9 million,
9.4 now.
9 to 10 million.
9 million. Want to get those numbers right. Prices have exploded since we budgeted for that. Where are we right now in the process in regards to design and CDs?
We are, Parks is doing outreach right now to look to see how we want that park to go. The park is really used as, it's kind of an overflow
Yeah.
for the youth center right now. So it's a very important park. And so we're having outreach and we have money to start our design process.
So have we gone through the RFQ for design professionals or?
We're looking right now at our outreach first.
Okay, can we set a timeline? Can you provide a timeline to the commission so we know certain benchmarks, for example, outreach, RFQ for architect, designating an architect? I know we want to get into the budget, we're
Yes,
going to have the money.
we can do that, Mayor.
I'd like to see if we can get that going, so we can get an understanding of what is the horizon in regards to that project.
Understood.
Because that project is a priority for me, because it's a priority for the commission. And we had to do certain things in the commission to get certain things accomplished, and that was important. I gave my word to the commissioner that I would back him up on this project.
And the reason that we funded that at that 100% level, because that was agreed to as a priority project, and it's really for the commission to decide for the future of those items.
Oh wait, that's
not for us.
like we discussed that day. The growth of the city is going to come from the north,
Ordered lunch here.
and we need to have not only continue to get little pocket parks like we're getting, but we need to make sure that we have a world-class park in that area.
And it's our overflow for the youth center.
When can we have that, I guess, update
Doesn't look good.
timeline to have it, you all come back with that information?
We can provide that update in the first meeting in August.
Yeah, you want to do that?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Unfortunately, it starts.
First meeting in August, Fred. Our Parks Director is here. I think what we can do is the first meeting in August, we can come back and provide a current update on Phillips Park.
Are you good with that? Oh, go ahead. It's not a meeting unless you're up here.
We did present the project recently. We presented to the commission. So what we did is, we have that concept design. In order to get down to an actual plans with design, we do need to go to additional public input. We did not want to go to public input until, well, even before summer, until we figured out if this funding was going to continue. If it gets approved as planned, then in September, our plan was to look at getting another public input meeting at that point, then getting down to the nuts and bolts, because it's an extensive design and there's going to be a lot of opinion, and then we go from there.
Well, and we do not want to have public input during the summer, so it's a
correct.
bad time to do it.
Right.
So that's why we want to do it after the school starts again.
But as the mayor said, we would just want to make sure things stay on schedule and we're kept abreast of what's happening. And at the end of the day, town those neighborhood meetings are going to come down to pickleball. So,
So,
you know,
so what,
it's just reality. It's the reality we live in today.
what we can do is provide an update. Yeah. We can provide an
We
update
do have
after we do
pickleball courts
the,
there, by the way.
after we do the public input meeting, public input process, and we give them a month. We can come back and tell you what the findings are and what we're going to move forward in there after that. So it'll be sometime right after that public input meeting. All right. Thank you.
Okay, so this is the plan that we propose. Again, this would get us City Hall completed in 2027 and Phillips Park in 2025. And so if there's not any other comments, we can move on to the next session. This is a critical area, right? So this was a plan that was established by you all, and we recommend that we continue to fund this plan and to give it the funding that it needs to finish off the projects that you all identified as critical.
So here's my 2 cents. Seal the exterior of this building, get the windows done, get the walls sealed, so we don't have water intrusion. So we can't be penny wise and pound foolish. We're putting new stuff in on the 3rd floor. Why let it get water damaged? Another challenge for my colleagues, you know. I have a story I can tell you about my daughter, and she didn't order the caulking done on the top window that I didn't do. I'll reserve that, but, you know, penny wise, pound foolish, she ended up with a lot more damage as a result of that.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. We got to find the money for that project, Mr. Manager.
Windows are 1 to 1.5 million.
I know.
Because we have to match existing profiles. We've already looked at 10 or 15 window manufacturers, and we're looking at a steel window right now to match that profile. There are issues with the historical board, whether we want to replace the windows or not, so we're going to bring that directly to the city commission to make the determination. The windows that we have now are not very strong, not very water resistant. We also have a building that's out of oolite, so it's very permeable. And the building consists of terracotta block and limestone, Miami oolite. So it's a very permeable building. So the many areas that we can keep the waterproofing out, the better the environment inside the building, and the better and better for the structure of this building. And having the concrete tested, I already have some information. I can get.
And it will help
brief
bring
the
our
commission on
insurance
that.
costs down.
And it'll bring
I'm sorry, Vice Mayor?
And it'll help bring our insurance costs down.
Yes.
Can you do me a favor? So maybe it'll help my colleagues and help myself when we have to address certain issues, whether we're going to do wooden windows or we're going to move in a different direction that mimics wooden windows. Can you provide, maybe your staff can provide guidance where other cities have been in a similar situation where they've had a historic building and what they have done during these tough times in regards to costs? Can maybe we can look at other municipalities that have similar city halls like we do, that are historic in nature, and that they've, maybe considered using a different composite, a different material that looks like wood, but that gives us a much better protection against the elements. Because the cost savings are dramatic. Number one, the maintenance for wooden windows is very significant. And I want to make sure that, maybe we hire an outside consultant who's an expert in historic preservation. Maybe they can provide us with a little bit of guidance in regards to other options that we have besides putting wooden windows in. I know certain people think that's sacrilegious, but at the end of the day, we have to do what's right. And currently, you look at the windows throughout City Hall, it's unacceptable. We need to figure this out. I know we tried to get some state appropriations dollars for that. We weren't successful. I think we need to rebrand that, maybe for next year, and go after it again in a different form. But I'm not willing to just say we're gonna put wooden windows and spend an extra $1 million when potentially
We have looked at windows that have similar profiles. These windows are very thin, and they would have to meet the current wind loading and impact resistance requirements. So we're looking at steel window, similar to what used in Miami High, because the normal impact windows that we've looked at so far have are much larger and and have the wood has a larger impact on the window as far as the window look. This building is highly vulnerable. Those windows have very little strength resistance. The permeability issue is not there. And we do put shutters on, but that's a facade. Those shutters are anchored to Miami Oolite. There's not even loads there. We do that just to keep water infiltration out for low event storms like Irma and things like that. But if we really have a hurricane, like the West Coast, then those things will get ripped out more than likely. So because you're fastening to something that has very little strength, right? So getting windows in this building, impact resistant windows that also provide a lot of water resistance is something that will maintain the building, and also from a hurricane perspective will when you start losing windows, you really start you have a good chance of losing the building.
So with regard to the funding on this project, what my recommendation would be for our July 1 budget is that you maintain the plan, and that if we're able to identify additional funding, you give the manager and staff time to work out, how they would address the windows, get a better understanding of the real cost of that and the plan for that. Keep the plan the way that it is for now, and over the summer, if we identify additional fundings and we have a more solid understanding of what that cost could look like and the timing of installation of new windows, that we could try and work that in over the summer. If not, we are planned to fund additional money in 25 and 26, and staff can work to have that as part of a next phase of our plan. And so if there's not any other discussion on the priority projects, I'm going to move on to the next section. This is actually the easiest section of all. So this is our utility improvements. These are stormwater and sanitary sewer projects. These are all funded from the system. The systems both fully fund the operation and the maintenance on their own. And so you'll see here that each one of those projects are proposed to be fully funded at 100% of the ask, and it's coming from from the stormwater and sanitary sewer system rates. These are the fees that residents and commercial businesses pay towards the system for their water rates. The only item, like we spoke about earlier today, is that one item that cannot be funded from the system revenue, and that is the connections to the system for the 187,500. And so if there's no questions on that, I'm going to hide the future year funding again and go to the next section. So that's $9.1 million, 187,000 of it coming from general capital. The next section are projects that we have identified as critical. And so I know all of these terms, priority, critical, right? So we also work very hard to kind of prioritize the projects that are coming up in the system. And so although they're not matrices, these are still critical components and things that we've identified that need to be done in the city. And so the first one is the emergency generator matrix. We have been trying to build a matrix to replace emergency generators, but first we're trying to make sure that all of our critical facilities, specifically those public safety facilities and those that we would use for emergency operations, have generators. And so this 680,000 is a portion towards building the matrix and some funding generator at Firehouse 3 and some work at the Country Club as well. And so that's 680,000. The recertification of city facilities, and so we all know what's happened in the recent years with buildings not being recertified, and so the city also has the obligation to make sure that our buildings are recertified. And so the ask is about $2.4 million, but we've gone ahead and scheduled that over 2 years. For $1.2 million in fiscal year 24 to give staff the ability to address any needs that come out of those recertification requirements. Sidewalk repair replacement program. So there you're going to see that there's 3 categories of sidewalks. One is sidewalk repair and replacement. This is for existing sidewalks. Further down on this sheet, you're going to see new sidewalks and you're going to see new crosswalks. And so we all agree, I think, on this commission that the repair and replacement of existing sidewalks is a critical need in this city. Typically, we fund about $1.2 million between sidewalks and new sidewalk repairs and new sidewalks. This year, the department did an estimate of what it would take for them to get far along in addressing all of the repairs and sidewalk needs, and they gave us an estimate of about 2.5. That doesn't address everything, but it addresses a lot. We are proposing between general capital, roadway, the local option gas tax, CITT funds, about 1.25 of that ask, so about 50% of that ask. We know that this is a priority, but as you continue going down the line, you're going to see that $23 million begins to whittle down. And so we're proposing half of that ask to go towards the replacement of sidewalks. 300,000 of it is general capital. We were able to fund the majority of it out of roadway. Bridge repairs and improvements, also something that's critical to our city. This is not necessarily enough to address every bridge, but this is putting aside some monies to be able to address some critical items, and also there's some grants that are being pursued, so if we needed to match a grant, that would make that funding available to the department for that use. And so we believe that these are projects that are critical to put funding towards. Again, we're not able to fund 100% of the ask, but we believe that we should do a significant job on it.
Sorry, I have a question. With regards to the sidewalk repair replacement, we've had the conversation that, you know, even after we fix every sidewalk, within a couple of years, we have to start the process all over again.
Yes.
So how do we work that financially? Because I understand the 5-year plan, but by year 7, we have to start all over again.
Yes, so we typically put in $1.2 million towards sidewalk repairs and new sidewalks. About $700,000 of that goes to repair and replacement, similar to our matrices. Each year, we fund about $700,000. It's not always enough to take care of the backlog, which is, again, why the department put in that request of 2.5 to try and get ahead of the curve. The question is can we fund that full 2.5? How far ahead can we get? So we're recommending giving them half of the ask, maybe trying to give them another increase next fiscal year so that they can continue to tackle that and then go back to a more stable number for future years. But we do fund consistently recurring monies in this area.
Okay, thank you.
My pleasure. I'm going to hide these columns again. Okay. So those are the critical projects. The ask was about 5.9. We're funding 3.5 of that ask.
So it just spills over to next year.
It'll just spill over to future years, right? And if there's anything over the summer, we would recommend putting them to those critical and those priority projects unless the commission has other direction for us.
Can you do me a favor, Mr. Manager, through the manager, if you'd be so kind? I'd like to make sure that we provide this workshop on our website, the video, complete video, and also this spreadsheet, obviously lock it. I would like it to be provided under workshop number 1 so that everyone can review this. Because I used to have a lot of meetings at my home that I used to invite people to. And they would always ask me, where's the money? Where's the money? We have so many projects we have to address. Where's the money? I want people in between as we move from workshop number 1 to our budget hearing, 2nd, 3rd, and final ratification of the budget. I want people to be able to see how the process works. They can watch all the videos because there was so many comments made about, malfeasance and where's all the money going and where's this, where's that. I want people to see, like she just said right now, and I bring it up because she made a very good point. These are emergency requests, We don't have enough money for emergency requests, so what do? They spill over to next year. We can't fund them. There's a lot of comments about, for example, where did the money go for City Hall? Always been a comment. Where's the money for City Hall? Where's the money for City Hall? I want people to be able to track it so clearly that everything here, like we've always done, we haven't changed the process, it's the same process for years, but I want people to be able to track it very, very clearly. And that we make sure that we're as transparent as possible. So that we don't hear, again, like we've heard so many times, you know, there's money missing and that there's projects that were appropriated, that weren't finished. I want it to always be a very clear paper trail.
We can do that, Mayor.
Always. Thank you.
So just quickly for a recap. So as staff, we are very careful to make sure that we are representing the priorities that we hear from the dais, from our directors, and from the residents and the conversations that are had as we make these recommendations. And so the next two sections, you're going to see that we are not funding a significant number of 24 asks. We, just in the general capital, we started off with $23.4 million. In those categories that we have gone through right now, we're funding about 17.2 million of that 23.4. And so what's left is how we then prioritize the projects that we're recommending. And again, this is a recommendation. If you tell us there's another priority, you know, staff can always tell you what the status of a project is, why something is a priority, and can't wait or should be funded over another project. But as we go through this list, you're going to see more and more of those 24 asks not being funded because we only have that balance left now to use. And so I'm going to go through the next section, which is the recurring projects. And so many of these projects are matrices in the making. So categories of and areas of projects that require recurring funding, such as new sidewalks, crosswalks, traffic calming. And while important to the city, not necessarily those matrices that the city has to have in order to continue. And so there are some of those things here. One day, some of these we hope will rise to those commission-approved matrices that we commit to fund every single year because we now have identified the ability to fund them. So I'm just going to continue going down the list. And so the first one is LPR speed trailers. We did not identify any funding for this request. Waterproofing of historic facilities and waterproofing of non-historic facilities. You see that the ask of each of those is just under $1 million for each, so $1.6 million for waterproofing. And again, this is a proposed matrices to begin to set aside money to waterproof our facilities to make sure that we are maintaining the integrity, keeping them from leaking. But it is a significant investment, and so as of right now, we're not recommending funding. As we go through the projects, you'll see what we are recommending funding for and why. And so ADA remediation. So ADA remediation, this is also funding that is set aside to make sure that we are addressing ADA remediation. That does not mean that projects specific do not have funding for their own ADA. So when we do a facility like 427 or we do a facility like City Hall, within those projects, we address any ADA compliance. And so this is not funding for use within projects, but this is remediation of other facilities and other areas as needed. And we do have an ADA plan and a comprehensive plan that has use for these funds. Energy and water efficiency at facilities. Each year, we do try to fund investment into this program. And so this year, we are not at this point recommending funding, but we do feel that it is critical. It is a cost-saving measure in our facilities. Again, within projects, we do make sure that we are bringing things, that we are installing new equipment that addresses this, this priority. But this year, we are not, at this time, proposing funding. And I know Matt kind of gave me a hard time on the way in here, so I may have to find a little money for him next year. Citywide environmental remediation. This has been a project that we have been setting aside money for. We have that site at 72nd Avenue, a crucial site to our city. But as you can see, the ask for this is about about $2 million to remediate that site. And at this time, we're not proposing any funds to go towards that project. We do have some prior year, but not anywhere enough to address that site. Installation of multi-pay stations, we are funding that completely out of the, sorry, that was a little fast, out of the parking fund. Okay, and the next one as well, the Miracle Mile and Giralda paver maintenance program. We are planning to fund that completely out of the parking fund. And that is the maintenance of the pavers and other components of Miracle Mile and Giralda. Purchase of land. So Mayor, this is one that we try to fund every year. I have a recommendation. So we have currently $245,000 available in the purchase of land impact fees that we are proposing to use $250 to fund half of the $500,000 that we try to fund each year out of general capital, and use the impact fees to get you to the $500,000 to continue setting aside funds for the purchase of land.
So let's go over this, okay? I want my colleagues to understand what's going on here, okay? So this is very near and dear to my heart because I always want to buy as many pieces of property as I can to put into the city portfolio, especially parks. We talked about this yesterday in regards to the legislation, the 0.5 fee that is placed on developers in regards to construction projects. So they're funding to the tune of millions of dollars our ability to not only buy land, but also renovate certain projects, certain parks. This is $500,000 that is set aside in the budget that has nothing to do with that. So what you're witnessing here, Mr. Manager, did we put $500,000 last year in the budget?
I believe we put 300.
I want to make sure we talk about this so my colleagues understand. Outside of public safety, to me, there's nothing more important in a city than your parks. That defines your city, especially with how many young people and elderly people we have in this community that want to enjoy our parks and green space, and this is critically important. So last year, when things got tough during COVID, I cut $500,000. Having conversations with the manager, I said, don't put $500,000 of this money into the budget. Use that for projects that we needed in regards to an emergency basis. This year, you're giving me 250, but you're also using 250 from the legislation that I wrote. So it's not really you're giving me 500, you're really giving me 250.
We're making it
Let me
whole.
explain to you why. I know what you're doing, but in the spirit of compromise, I'm fine with the 250. Okay? I'm okay. But this is a lesson for this commission as a whole. So for 2 years, something that is very important to me, I don't get fully funded. Why? Because there's other more pressing needs that we need to address in this community, and it can not only be all about you and what you want. You need to work together. That's why I mentioned Phillips Park. I'd rather use some of that money to meet the Vice Mayor's needs in regards to ADA issues, things that are important to her, that she's identified over the last few years. Once my colleagues to my left and to my right, they identify what is important to them on the budget, we can work on those issues also. So I brought this up because it's important in the spirit of compromise to understand that this is the way government works. Last year we got 0, this year we funded it back to 50%. And it's a pretty significant hit. What does this mean? People are asking purchase of land. Like, give me an example. Give me an example of purchase of land. I'm driving down 37th Avenue, similar to like I do all the time in the city, and I'm always looking to see properties, things that are for sale. Number one, maybe I'll buy it for myself, like I've done before. It's a great opportunity to own property in the city. Number two, maybe we can find something great for the city. Let me give you an example. The Think Studio, I found that property, and I brought it to the manager. I don't want to buy it for myself. This should be in the city's hands. This is a treasure, a historic treasure. Let's put it in the city's hands. Let me give you another piece of property. The developer came to meet with us to build 4 townhomes on 37th Avenue and Ponce. Remember that day? He was asking for 4 times the amount of units that you could put on that piece of property. We had a conversation. It wasn't moving forward. I said, would you be interested in selling this property? Because that is the most northern piece of property in the city, and we could use a beautiful entrance feature on 37th Avenue and Ponce. He said he would. We passed it on to Zeta and the team. They started negotiating, and we use monies allocated in this line item in the budget to purchase that piece of property, along with a whole host of other pocket parks that we bought in the downtown using this money. So moving forward, I'm happy that we're funding it to 250. I would like to get it back to 500, but I understand there's other capital needs. But I just want to say thank you, because we didn't get it funded last year, and we got a portion of it funded this year. And that is the spirit of compromise amongst us all here in the commission. Thank you.
I have a question regarding the list that you had up there.
Certainly.
If you could put it back up, if you don't mind. And by the way, I totally agree that sometimes this is like one of those Iron Chef shows. Create a dish and we have the ingredients. We got to figure out how much of this and how much of that to come up with something that's good for the community. So,
Yes.
The mayor was talking about the cost of construction, as was the city manager a little while ago, with regards to the Granada Diner, also known as Burger Bob's. What's the status of that? I'm hearing that costs are, like everywhere else, shooting through the roof. So I think it's something worth discussing now at this juncture. I don't know if the manager or anybody wants to say where we're at with that in terms of also with regards to cost or any obstacles that we're encountering. I want it out in the open.
So the estimate that we have in the book here is about $990,000 for the renovation of the diner based on the proposed design that's been discussed. I know that it is in procurement and that there are estimates coming in. It would be likely, based on everything that we're seeing in the construction prices that we're getting for all of our other projects, that the costs are greater than that.
I really don't want to say where we are in procurement, but that is a reasonable level. So
And
we
so-
don't bring out the actual bid prices right now.
And if I may, and I'm happy you brought this up, I have 2 items, including the 250 in parks, that to me is important. But these are one of the 9 items that I'm considering potentially moving with the help of my colleagues in the commission to the front burner for the manager to address the issue of Burger Bob's, the shortfall.
And
These are one of the issues, not because I want to do it, because I think we have no choice but to do it. It's time to get this project done, and I think it's critical to get it open. And we do have money, obviously, in that bank account as a result of the other mechanism that's raising money through permit fees.
And so you'll notice that we don't have it proposed for funding.
I know.
We know that it is a priority that has been discussed here on the dais and in the public. And so when we have direction on how to move forward with that project, we will identify whether it be funds in the current fiscal year, which would mean that we would have to go through the list of projects that we have and see what
Doesn't get funded.
can give up some funds, or whether some revenues are outperforming, that we can see some maybe estimates over the summer, revenues that are maybe outperforming in the current year. But currently, we don't have it funded. We don't have it proposed for '24. If it is a priority of the commission, from that 23 million that we've allocated, right, we're at about 17.2 now, we would need to see where we would take funding to be able to put it in the diner for fiscal year '24. And so this is what these discussions are for.
We discussed on the diner a few times that the restaurant equipment was one of the reasons why there was difficulty completing it. And to my knowledge, the equipment that was in there worked. Have we looked at refurbishing it and putting it in? In the meantime, we can replace it when prices come down in the future, when more funding is available in
We have
the
all new
future?
equipment, Vice Mayor.
Pardon?
So we have all new equipment. The equipment was not in the best of shape. It was 20, 30 years old. So the project is for complete restoration of that area, complete
I understand.
renovation of that area.
You already have the equipment, or you still need to purchase the equipment?
The plans call for all new work.
I understand the plans call for all new work. I asked about refurbishing. I have a 30-year-old stove. It's not the prettiest, works fine. Okay? I'm not going to replace it until it stops working.
Vice Mayor, if I may, just step in. I think there's,
Even doing that, Vice Mayor, the level of magnitude would be quite high. Because that's about, we would have to look at that. But it's, that equipment is probably original to Burger Bob's.
I understand.
So it's probably
I
40
understand.
years old, 45 years old.
Antiques can work too, including antique cars.
We can leave the
What-
multi there if we can.
If it works, perhaps we can put it in service for now, clean it, make sure the electrical connections are good for the electrical stuff, the gas connections don't have any leaks, and get things open and running in the meantime. And when the restaurant equipment is not such a tight market, we can get some good stuff then. Restaurants will close in a downturn in economy, we might even be able to find something used.
what I recommend is that, and I understand what you're saying, Vice Mayor, what I recommend the manager to do is, it's the will of the commission, is to look at the cost to clean up and refurbish and maintain the existing system versus what it will cost for new. Look at that analysis, find out what it is, and then maybe we can find something that's used, that's in good shape. I know there's secondhand shops for all this kind of stuff. There's one near Little River that I know that
There's a
has
number of, yes.
there's a number of facilities that deal in this, but again, to run older equipment costs a lot more money, in maintenance. And again, this goes back to something that we have to take responsibility for. As a city. We failed to not properly check in with the owner at Burger Bob's to make sure that things were being maintained. And for a long time, they ran Burger Bob's like they wanted to. They weren't accepting credit cards, they weren't doing the books properly, the place wasn't maintained properly. So now we're paying the consequences of that. But now we have a different system in place, and that is with Zeta. We're reviewing all city assets. She does a quarterly report. We talked about that in yesterday's commission. So I understand what the Vice Mayor is saying. I agree with her. It's fine. But I'm just afraid that we're going to throw good money at bad. And I want to just start, I'd like to see how much it will cost to refresh that and move forward, because I've done a lot of restaurants. I've done a lot of restaurants in this community and throughout Miami-Dade County. And I'm telling you, sometimes it's better just to start fresh because the systems are a lot more advanced, and you're not spending so much money on maintenance.
I just want to add sort of, I'm a little disheartened because every time I go in that area, I'm asked, when is Burger Bob's going to be completed? Where is it? Why is it taking so long? And now I'm hearing, I guess I'm understanding, we're waiting, the city's waiting to know if it's a priority. It's always been a priority for the community. It's been a priority for us, for the colleagues that have been here, colleagues that joined us recently. I've been working with Fred and Carolina, working with a consultant on the interior design. You have to come back to me with a proper rendering. So everybody's been working full steam ahead to have this happen. And to now hear that the funding's not necessarily set aside to have it done, it's just frustrating as hell.
So I want to make sure,
Short
I
a
may
week.
have misspoken
Short a
in
week.
that, I may have misspoken in that whether it's a priority. We've heard the conversations, we know that is a priority. Once we have those final costs in and the commission approves that cost to move forward with the project, we will then identify. I believe that that's going to be something that's going to come up in this fiscal year. If it's not something that we
Commissioner,
are.
I think that we need to look at what we've got, and it's going to be, we're talking about $1 million. And if the commission wishes to spend $1 million from other projects, so be it. I have no issue. The plans are done, and we can move forward. But I do think that we have to be careful when we appropriate things, because we have to fund them. And that funding has to come from somewhere. And so whether we get $1 million from here, we can certainly do it, but I do think that what we're going through now is deciding what projects are going to be funded and which ones are not. And we can't fund them all.
No,
So I think the commission, so I wish I could, but I can't.
So let's do this. Let's do this. I'll start. Let's see who follows. Take the $250,000 from parks, the $250,000 for land acquisition for a second year. I won't have any money going into land purchase. So you have, and swing it over to Burger Bob's.
Okay.
Now, through the manager, excuse me. Now I leave it up to my colleagues to help me appropriate from other projects that we'll be taking from, or from other line items that we won't be funding. Because there was a very, very clear comments that were made here. This is a priority. So I'm taking away from my priority to make sure that this priority gets funded. There's a lot of comments that were said about malfeasance and there's no money and the projects and where's no money. You got $250,000 from that are important to me for land purchase that are no longer going to be. So that's 2 years that a line item that is important to me that's not funded. So I would like for my colleagues in the next commission meeting or in the next workshop to come back, and I will look at other line items with the manager and with the finance director and with yourself. Schedule a meeting, please, through my office.
Yes.
And we will go through line items of certain things that I view as priorities that hopefully I will pare back, to hopefully be able to fund this project. But this project started off, again, to remind everybody, as a $500,000 project
Yes.
in the middle of COVID. And all the prices spun out of control, and now we're at $1 million. Hopefully the commissioner, with his meetings through Carolina and Fred, they can pare back a little bit of the interior design. I know, I do this for a living. You're not gonna save that much money. You maybe get 5%, 4%. Something is something. If you can shave $50,000 off, that's fine. But don't forget, the less you spend in regards to quality, it just gets cheaper. The chairs break, things break. You have to buy, we wanna buy American-made products. We don't wanna buy just Chinese because it's cheaper. So you're gonna give in quality just to get certain things done. So I'm willing to put.
Mayor, you're in the construction industry.
No, but-
You know that major cuts are not done by taking away two things.
Mr. Manager, I've tried to explain
know
this. I've tried to explain this, but now we have a new commission. And I'm gonna start by leading by example. So I look for my colleagues for the next commission meeting, for the next workshop, to come and bring $750,000 that we're missing to get Burger Bob's done. I started with $250,000. Slash my line item, we won't do parks.
And by the way, I'm sorry, Vice Mayor. My point is, and I understand, that's why I mentioned the cost of construction. And I understand, like I said, that we're an iron chef trying to find the proper ingredients for the right price.
Yes.
My point is, we're finding out about this dilemma, at least in a public setting now. I would have preferred to have been updated prior to this meeting so that when we do encounter our residents, we can sort of give them a more effective explanation of the challenges that we're facing. That's my point. I know it's tough and it may not happen immediately, may not happen, like you said, at a certain date and time. But when we talk to our residents to be as best informed, it helps us do our job.
But
But let me add one more thing, because, yeah, we do need to be updated on the projects. Unless we've sold, destroyed, or damaged the cooking equipment, or, and I understand induction stoves, if that's what we're looking to purchase, are much more efficient. I've dealt with apartments, 55 units and having to replace stoves and so forth. We bought used, by the way, to save money. I've replaced burners to replace money. That equipment was working on the day that we closed Burger Bob's. There is still the furniture and storage. So if we really wanted to open up the door, all we need is the structure inside to be finished, the electrical to be finished, the toilet to be finished. Those types of items we can't recycle. But as a measure to get the doors open sooner, and we can fund new equipment new equipment later, if we still have the equipment, and it should still be working because it was working on the day the doors were closed, we need to take a hard look at this.
I'm going to answer your question for you without even having the answer. I'm pretty sure when the interior demolition work was done, certain things were probably not saved. And they were probably scrapped.
I will look into it.
They were probably scrapped. That's what happens in construction projects, unless when you open the plans, it says the following line items have to be recycled, saved, or put aside for one reason or another, or reused.
Or sold.
Yeah, or
because
sold, whatever, scrap
other-
metal or whatever that was, or sold and sold for scrap metal or.
Did we look at saving 40-year-old equipment? We need to take a look at that. I think that when this was discussed, I think there was escalation costs that were brought up. I don't think a lot of people believed in the escalation costs because everybody has their own ideas of what construction should be. And those escalation costs, Mayor, as you know, because you're in it every day, happen because that's where we're at right now. And that's why a project goes up from $4.5 million to $9 million or $9.5 million. And we have that at Firehouse 4. These things are happening now. This is not an inflation. And most people look at the CIP and look at milk going up 10%. Well, construction has gone up 50, 60% or more in some of those areas. And that happened.
But with that being said, the vice mayor is correct.
And that,
If we would have known back then that we were going to be in this position, we could have saved certain things and potentially refurbished them.
Okay, let's look at whether or not they were destroyed or in storage, and then we can move on from this.
I do remember there was a conversation, because I watched the meeting, where the prior commission asked for staff to look into selling or restoring the furniture that was there, because that came from public comment. Was that not done at all?
Rita has the furniture.
Okay.
So if I may, through the manager, could I have Zeta and Fred to come up just to have insight? Because Fred, I mean, we've been talking about the interiors, just to get some clarity on, I know the design we worked on is basically the equivalent of the most basic diner imaginable. So equipment, what's been saved, what hasn't. We're not doing gold fixtures, we're doing retro diner.
Good morning, Mayor, Commissioners. Good morning. Ms. Tennyson did purchase, and I don't recall how much for, I think it was $1,000, the furniture and the stools, the tables and chairs, I believe, which are being held in someone has them in storage before she left. That's.
When we went through the pro shop design and we started doing pro shop construction, then there was discussion as to what to do with the diner space. From what I recall, and we can look at it, there was direction to move forward because we were trying to speed up to get to a closer timetable. So when the pro shop opens, we can get anywhere a semblance of closeness to the diner. At that point, the first step that we did, which is what has been done, is the demo. So it wasn't a complete demo. We will check. I don't believe we have the equipment. That was part of the direction that was given to us to demo, from what I understand. And it is older equipment. It's commercial equipment, so it gets used a lot. I don't know with a new tenant whether they would have.
Yeah, at that point, I stopped being involved. I imagine that.
So let me ask you a quick question, Mr. Manager. If we have the budget in October, we have $250,000 now. The budget, let's say it's going to be $1 million. Just say a rough number, $1 million, the final number. Can we fund 50% of it this year and fund 50% of it next year, but get started on the project so that right when let's say we start in October, we have, let's say, $500,000. My commission is able to find another $250,000 to get that funded, and then we can put the other $500,000 in 2024 October. So as we're building, as we're doing construction, I don't like to do things like this. I know you don't. I know you don't. This is not.
You see, Diana.
I got it. No, but I don't do this in the private sector.
Right.
But the point. Let me just give me 1 second. Okay?
Absolutely.
So, to explain it, we put $500,000 in this year's budget. We start construction October 1st or September 1st, whenever we finalize the budget. I don't have the exact dates on me here. We move forward. We get started with the project. and we finalize payment, or we look for during that year ways to fund the project from different revenue sources that maybe come in or that don't come in, and we can finalize the payment the subsequent year and make this a one year project, 6-month project, because I think it's going to be hard to find another $750,000 in the budget without cutting from sidewalks, without cutting from traffic calming, without saying we're not going to do a project.
So,
And this is not a gold-plated project.
I know.
It's not.
I know it's
Not a
not.
gold-plated project.
You don't have to explain
This is
that.
just a diner that would, hopefully will last, will have some longevity and will last another 20 or 30 years, right? Because that diner's been there for, how long has Burger Bob's been there? 40 years? And so we got furniture that's 40 years old, we have equipment that's 40 years old, there's a lot of wear and tear. There's a lot of wear and tear when something's been used for 40 years.
And it hasn't been
So
maintained.
let me interrupt, because before Fred sits down, we've been talking about in the future redoing the youth center. We have $500,000 on line 145 for the youth center. Is that for critical stuff that stops leaks and keeps the doors open, or is that a?
That is an initial funding to start some preliminary design to be able to start having the discussion of the long-term plan for the youth center. And so that was to be able to make some funds available, to have some preliminary design that we could start having conversations with the public and at the dais about what the plan for the youth center is.
Okay, so I brought it up to think about whether we finish Burger Bob's and kick that can one more year down the road. Think about it.
The youth center's been having its own structural new skin in the 90s built over bones of 70 years old. So my understanding, the building's having some issues.
I know,
So
but if that's
one-
just a,
That's one can that, I'll be more than happy to talk about it, but that's one can that's been kicked down so far that the can is unrecognizable.
I understand.
But I'm sure there are plenty of other pockets of funds that I'll be more than happy to look and find, the necessary funds that we're looking for.
For the design plans on youth center, let's look at the actual dollar numbers. This is a hypothetical dollar number, 500,000. Maybe we can split the baby to get design plans going.
Vice Mayor, it's possible that we have more monies coming in July.
Yes.
And we can take a look at that. But we've also discussed about potentially using that money for the windows at City Hall. So we could put it off the windows at City Hall and maybe do actually Burger Bob's. It's always a give and take.
Well, I mean, windows at City Hall, again, penny wise, pound foolish. Don't replace them. The amount of repair and damage that can happen to this building and the mold
That's the beauty of this.
issue continues to increase and increase and increase. So I think we need to look at
Iron
stuff.
Chef.
I think we need to look at stuff that's where money's being set aside. It can possibly wait one more year. I mean, I'll continue to look at this and ask the question.
There is 500 there, yes.
So I canceled my lunch plan, so I just, so you know.
I'm confident that the manager and his team will help us find those funds.
So, to your point, if the project is not adopted as part of this capital and budget process, the funds are not there in any given year. Until the commission adopts something, and we're going to get to another item in a moment, that requires us to fund it. And at that point, we always have worked with you to find funding in one way or another. Sometimes projects suffer, right? Sometimes it may go taken away from something that has been set aside. Sometimes it is as a result of revenues that have outperformed in any given year. The revenues will come in over the summer. I'm confident that we can work to fund the project. Again, the statement of it being a priority, we know that it's a priority. We've heard the conversations, but the reality is that the project was not funded in the fiscal year 23 budget. It is a significant ask, and so once the project has been adopted by all of you and it's underway, we will identify the funding. Something might have to give, whether it's the $250 for the land purchase or take away some of the funding that goes into sidewalks. We're giving it 1.2, maybe it gets 1. Those are the kind of priorities that you have to tell us where we can touch. And so this is where we look to you for those hard decisions. As we go down the rest of this list, you're going to see that those projects that are funded with the remaining money, most of them, we don't have a choice. Some of them are grant projects. We have a grant, we either give it back and don't do the project, or we do the project, or they're underway. And so let's continue down the list.
Yeah.
Give us also an opportunity, if the project is adopted in the way that it comes in, then we will fund it. And so, but it is a significant number for me to put and take away from all of these other items right now that have also been expressed as priorities. And so let's continue down the list is my recommendation, and then we can always come back to the conversation if there's something that you say, hey, there it is, cut that. Okay? Anything? Everybody okay with that?
I'm good.
Okay. So we jumped to the diner, but we jumped over the country club improvements. And so the country club improvements, Parks, Community Recreation, in coordination with Public Works, has asked us for $1.4 million. We have identified $500,000 towards the improvements of things that are critical and our conversations that are already underway. We realize that there is more improvement that can happen in the country club. Similar to other areas, we are also hoping to have a matrices where we maintain the country club once we've addressed all the immediate renovations. But we do feel at this point that $500,000 is the appropriate number to set forward. If we have more, and as other priorities shake out, we will set more to it. Granada Golf,
How much did you say for the country club?
we're putting $500,000 in for next fiscal year. That will address specifically, there's a specific item that's about $300,000 and would give them a little bit more to address some other items.
That's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money.
The country club, Mayor, is, as you know, was in much worse shape than we thought it was in. It also takes a year to get events in, because weddings and so forth are planned on a much longer term. So we feel that as time goes on, the events are going to provide a substantial amount of money that we'll be using to put back into the country club, and eventually it should be a good profit center.
I don't doubt that. I don't doubt that, but I mean, it's a lot of money. It's a lot of money.
It was before, and it's a much better place now. And but those events take time to, because they're done with a lot of time.
Our hope would be is that eventually this would be a fully self-sustaining program, and that the revenue would cover the expenditures, including any maintenance and ongoing renovations.
Well, actually,
At
we're
this
looking
time, we're
at a
not there.
money-making project here, eventually.
Yeah.
Something that's going to be a profit center for the city.
So going down the list, we spoke about the diner, Granada Golf Course improvements. We do have some prior year monies and an ask for about $170,000. At this time, we're not putting any funding towards that. AEDs, so we talked about this yesterday. You gave the administration some direction to start a pilot. At the time, we were not putting any funding towards that pilot. We will now need to fund at least between $200,000 to $300,000 towards the pilot program for these AEDs. And so that's not reflected here, but we realize that it's something that we're going to need to plug in a number for. Okay,
Could you do me a favor?
of course.
So since this is the second project that we talk about today, that is a funding priority for the commission. Can we have an email after this meeting of maybe the 3 or 4 items that whatever comes out of this that are priorities? Obviously,
Yes.
Burger Bob's, AEDs, and circulate it to the commission through the manager's office, please.
Yes.
And tell us how short we are. How short we are. So we already have $250,000 that I've allocated from my line item, from the city's line item, excuse me, to this fund.
Right.
So I would like to know what is the exact number of money that we need to raise, depending on how many more items the commission seems to say that is important as a priority that we don't have funded, so we know what we're working with in the future coming workshops and budget hearings, so we can kind of bridge that gap and start taking money from other line items to fund these priorities.
Certainly, I'll do that after today.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Mr. Manager.
Yes, sir. Yes, Mayor.
So this is one of those items that we try to put funding towards each year. So the ask is 200,000, or the typical funding is 200,000. We're putting 100,000 towards citywide alleyway paving improvements. We currently have about 380,000 in prior year available. It doesn't mean that it's not being done. It just means that there may be something underway. New sidewalks. So I talked about that there's 3 categories of sidewalks in this spreadsheet. The first category was the replacement of existing sidewalks, which we currently are recommending 1.25 million towards. We typically fund 1.25 million between replacement and new sidewalks. We propose putting all of that towards replacement sidewalks in next fiscal year, and we did not fund anything for new sidewalks. We know that there is always conversations about new sidewalks, so those are priorities. Again, just because there's not any money there doesn't mean that we don't recognize that it's a need.
So I would like to add that to the email that I requested.
Yes.
And I would like to have the opinion of the manager and his team of what do you think we should be funding for new sidewalks. I think the number should be $500,000.
Okay.
Maybe it should be 250. Please advise.
Yes.
Thank you.
The same is true for sidewalk extensions and crosswalk installations. The request or the typical funding for this program would be about 250,000. At this time, we didn't place any funding in that line item. Citywide street resurfacing program, we try to put about $500,000 towards that each year. We know that that is also a priority, so we have fully funded it. 493 from the general capital and 7,000 from the neighborhood renaissance program that was available for next fiscal year, and so that would fully fund this citywide street resurfacing program. Citywide traffic calming program, and so we know that this is a priority of the community and of the commission, and there's many discussions around this, and so we are proposing to fully fund it at the ask of $1.4 million. $1.2 million would come from general capital, 265 would come from roadway. And so roadway, which is local option gas tax, is restricted to specific projects. And so between the funding that we proposed for the sidewalk repairs and replacements and the citywide traffic calming, you see that we are absorbing the majority, if not all of that money. Biltmore Way streetscape improvement. This is also an ongoing conversation in the community. This $250,000 was proposed for some design work. At this time, we are not proposing funding that $250,000 for the Biltmore Way streetscape improvement. This is a much larger project, but this was just for some design work. Citywide landscaping and irrigation improvement, and so we all know how improvement citywide landscaping and the beautification of our city is, and we are always making headway and putting as much money towards this program as possible. In this fiscal year, Green Space Management is requesting $1 million to enhance landscaping and irrigation. We are currently proposing funding about half of that at $520,000. We know that there's always more that can be done, but this is what we're recommending at the moment. Residential waste pit restorations. I know firsthand how important that discussion is. We know that Public Works is consistently trying to keep up with restoring those waste pits. They have some funding in the current fiscal year. We are not proposing funding additional funds this year, but we have identified some potential funding to cover some of the need, some of the more immediate need. And so we're hoping to get a little bit more advanced this fiscal year and maybe have a gap next year.
I
Street,
think that's by the way, that's an important funding.
I agree, firsthand, I agree.
You have pits that are 4, 5, 6 feet deep.
Yes.
I called one in this past week, so I hate to do it, but I think we should add that to the list.
Most of them in your neighborhood.
I've seen cars drive into them and I get out.
I think we should discuss that.
I've received all of your emails, plus I am also thankful not to be on that email list any longer.
I think they found a Donner Party in one of them.
Tree succession planning, and so something that is important to the city, we try to fund tree succession each year. There is an additional amount of funding that we do receive through a trust, and so we are proposing to put $100,000 towards the street tree succession plan next fiscal year. Mango trimming along waterways, this is something that we try to fund. I don't believe that we funded it the last couple of years, and so we are not proposing any additional funding in the next fiscal year. And so you're going to see that these are recurring projects that we try to fund, that we think are important to fund, but maybe don't rise to some of the levels of some of the other projects that are in the prior categories. And I'm just going to kind of go to the right very quickly so that you can see in this category, everything in red are projects that are either underfunded based on the 24 ask or not funded at all, for a total of $8 million in this particular category. Okay. So I'm going to go on to the one-time multi-year projects. And I know that this list sometimes gives us agita, right? It gave me a little bit of heartburn as I went through and tried to identify what we had and where to place it, because I do hear the concerns and I do hear the conversations, but we have to work very hard to prioritize and to be good stewards, not only with our finances, but with the expectations that we set forth. And so I'm going to point out just quickly, a good majority of these projects are parks that have park enhancements, not necessarily park replacement. And so you're going to see that there are 2 major projects that are proposed for parks this year, and they are grant funded. And I'll just keep going down the list. So citywide litter receptacle, I'm sorry, I'm just going to go through the list of items that have fiscal 24 requests. So anything that doesn't have a 24 request, I'm not going to mention it. If there's a specific project that is near and dear to you or you'd like to ask a question about, please stop me, but I'm just going to go through these 24 requests on F for time's sake. Okay, so this is an ongoing project that has been requested each year. It's reworking the public works space planning. They'd like to improve where their staffing is, $228,000. It's something that we haven't been able to fund. We're not proposing funding it for next fiscal year. Facility impact glass installation. We do have some current prior year available. We do have some projects that we'd like to fund, but we're not proposing funding it this year for $265,000. Metal canopy structure for Public Works fuel station. Again, this is a small project that has kind of been kicked down the can a little bit. If we could fund it, we'll try to find $11,000 to fund it in next year. But right now, we are not funding it. Public Works facility exterior painting, similar to waterproofing. This is something that helps to maintain the integrity of our facility, $178,000. I don't believe it's an immediate need. I think it can wait another year. We're not proposing funding it next fiscal year, but it's an ask of $178,000. So then the next one is the renovation of the passport facility. We're working out the final estimate on this, but this is fully funded by Billy's special revenue funds, by the city clerk's special revenue funds. And so this is a project that we anticipate will be fully funded for next fiscal year out of those special revenue funds, which are restricted to use by his
That was my
area.
next question.
Yes.
You saw me leaning forward.
Yes, because that would be an easy picking. So thank you, Billy. Thank you for giving up your passport renovations. No, seriously, it's restricted, and so that will go towards the renovation of the passport facility.
Can't we make Burger Bob's part of the passport facility? I think it's
We can
really
have a
good.
passport window and coffee next door.
Yeah, I think it would be a nice mix.
Can we move it closer to City Hall? Thank you. Okay. So the next one, White Way Light Restoration. We're proposing using Art and Public Places funds for the continuation of the White Way Lights Restoration Program. And so that would be fully funded. Centennial Trail also would be funded out of Art and Public Places, so that is recommended to be fully funded. Biltmore Hotel, this is part of an agreement that we have with the Biltmore Hotel for which returns 50% of their revenue in any given year for maintenance of the facility. And so we anticipate that with the estimates that we have for fiscal year '24, that our contribution back to them would be $800,000. This is essentially revenue neutral, and that we will have reached the goal, the requirement of $5.2 million by fiscal year '25.
So I would like to just put on the record for my colleagues here, I would not like to renew that. Okay? I have all the respect for the Biltmore, I appreciate everything they do. I know this money's being reinvested in obviously the historic building, but for example, this is $800,000 that we could use, potentially, is 800,000?
800,000 is the estimate for,
800,000 that we could use, for example, to fund the litany of different projects that we need. I think we've been incredibly generous. I think we made a commitment, and we followed through with our commitment. But I think that we need to let this sunset, and I will not be entertaining, basically reapplying this process for another 5 years.
I would actually make a recommendation, since we are amending or considering the amendment of the lease, and they will have a substantial savings because of the insurance issue. Maybe we can sunset this as part of that amendment, and
we have
that'll
a-
be
we have a-
$800,000 in revenue we would have.
I don't know if we can do that.
Yeah, no,
I don't
Yeah.
think we can.
I mean, legal stepped out, but it's a legal agreement, I mean, it's an agreement that the city has signed with them. Now, you would have to reopen that agreement and.
So is our agreement
Sure.
for the insurance.
So,
So
may-
the Biltmore
let me-
Hotel agreement to pay into the, wondering if it could be reopened.
What we
and
are
adjust-
is, on that agreement, we give back 50% of the percentage rent that they pay us. So that's based on the percentage rent.
so the
Percent of
other
percentage. Up
difficult,
to $5.2 million.
That's
the
where
other
we finish,
difficult discussion is charging for the parking and using that revenue.
which is, again, a discussion that we should have as a commission, because we could potentially tie that revenue from the parking lot to the preservation of the structure in one form or another, a percentage of that amount of parking. And I've also heard from multiple different people, especially residents who live in the neighborhood, that they're concerned with the amount of people that are parking in that parking lot and leaving their cars for weeks, because it's a great place to leave your car and not have to pay for parking. For example, you get an Uber from there to the airport, costs you $20, and you don't have to pay to leave your car in the airport for 2 weeks, a week, or extended time. So there's a lot of people that are parking on that surface parking lot for free.
We're currently working with the feds to get that approved, because I don't believe that any hotel has free parking anymore.
Yeah.
Plus, people are leaving their vehicles there for using that as a free parking lot.
That-
And so once once we work that out with the feds, then we can come back and.
So
negotiate that.
this is an opportunity for us to have a revenue stream that we could tie into the building to address issues of historic preservation. You had a question for the city attorney in regards to whether we could vacate the last $800,000. Madam City Attorney?
So my understanding is the question is whether we can open up that amendment
Yep.
and change it. So that would require, of course, negotiation and agreement with the Biltmore, because it is something that was agreed to by the parties. And so we'd have to study it and see what we could do, but it would require, again, a negotiation.
Can we
and
put
agreement.
that as a commission item, next commission meeting agenda, to have a further discussion?
Sure.
On that, as well as the parking issues, or meet with us individually, or send us an email.
On the parking issue, it's currently, like the manager mentioned, is under the review of the National Park System. And so that's proceeding. It's just we're waiting for them, and then we
And as
can.
soon as we do get that taken care of, we will proceed in charging for parking there. The idea of that facility is that it goes 100% to for Biltmore restoration. 70% they control in certain areas, 30% we control. For instance, if we might want to do the cupola, that might not be the best thing for them. So we control 30% of where it goes, they control 70%, but all for restoration of the Biltmore.
All right.
okay. So the next project you'll see is the Girl Scout house restoration, a request of about $50,000. We're not currently recommending funding for that in next fiscal year. Structural preservation assessment, so this is the cost of an assessment of $8,000. It's a small amount, but we currently are not recommending funding for that particular project in this fiscal year. Miracle Theater restorations, a request of about $600,000 that we are currently not recommending, although we need know that Miracle Theater does have need. It's not something that we recommended as priority funding.
Can I ask you a quick question on that? In regards to the Miracle Theater, if you review their lease, I don't remember, are they responsible for the maintenance of the interiors or the exteriors of the building, or any maintenance? Any capital improvement projects or anything like that? Because they have a great deal with the city. They have a great deal. Do you know how much
Are we responsible? I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
The Miracle Theater,
are the
responsible for
current
maintenance?
leaseholders of the Miracle Theater, are they responsible for any capital improvement projects, any restoration, any maintenance of the building?
The maintenance of the building was, there was a $50,000 a year commitment that the city made to maintain some of the issues with the building. We also maintain the roof, the air conditioning, and all of the others. So basically,
We maintain
we maintain
also the envelope.
the
building
envelope.
envelope.
So, and we made a commitment for $50,000. They basically reimburse us for insurance up to a certain amount. We can't raise it more than 7% a year for insurance costs to the building, and they don't pay any rent.
They don't pay rent, yeah. Okay,
Okay?
thank you.
So this 600,000 is specifically for renovations to the marquee. So this, as well as the museum and other historic properties, that might be something that you might want to put into a priority project for future years, once we've done that.
Can I go back just 1 second?
Of course.
Can I put on the next agenda the fact of the Miracle Theater? I wanna understand on the record a little bit more about having a city property that doesn't pay rent. I wanna kind of have that conversation, because I think that every city property, again, it's part of the public trust, that every city property should be paying rent, especially if somebody's making money off of a city property. I know the Miracle Theater is a historic building and it's a great institution, but to me, if you're engaged in business with the city, at the end of the day, and we're spending the amount of money we're spending to make sure that building is in proper working order, that is, is an asset that the city is proud to have, everybody needs to have a little bit of skin in the game, I think, in my opinion. I'd like to have that in the next, I'd like for staff to present a little bit about the theater in regards to how long is the lease, what are our expectations, because if they're not paying rent, then I don't think it's fair for other entities that are engaged in city business. Like, for example, why should Burger Bob's pay rent? Why should it? Maybe they shouldn't pay rent. Maybe the golf shop shouldn't pay rent. Maybe that great restaurateur that's now doing business in the city now, maybe they shouldn't pay rent. Maybe we should be proud to have them in our city. Those are things. Maybe the Biltmore shouldn't pay rent. It's a great cultural institution. Maybe they shouldn't pay rent. Those are concerns of mine that I think that we need to be very, very careful, and we need to start looking at these issues, because again, if somebody's making a profit and being paid a salary, and they're working and handling a city property, then there should be some skin in the game. Not maybe a lot, but there should be something.
I have a question regarding
Would you like that at the next commission meeting?
I would, please.
I have a question regarding that. I'm sure there's an agreement between the city and the entity. I'd love to see what the agreement, when it was agreed to, and could that be circulated to us?
There was a lot of issues with that building. I remember a long time ago that as to what to do with that theater. It was looked at as even as a department store or some type of off-brand store. So the agreement calls for us to maintain the exterior envelope. That means the walls, the roof. We maintain the HVAC. So historical buildings are expensive to maintain. The Biltmore is very expensive to maintain. The more historical buildings that we acquire, the more money we have as far as maintenance. The museum is a lot of maintenance. So once we look at acquiring these buildings, we have to be careful that historical buildings these buildings tend to be 80, 90 years old, 100 years old, and they do require a lot of maintenance. We'll be happy to bring that out, Mayor. But that was the agreement that was done a long time ago.
I understand, but we need to bring that up and we need to discuss it. It's like case in point, when the Biltmore does come back up in 50 years, when that lease expires, just like Merrick Park, we're gonna try to get the best deal for the city. Just like, for example, Burger Bob's, just like the restaurant, for example, the restaurant on Miracle Mile wasn't paying rent for years. We didn't just, we made sure that we removed that tenant and we brought somebody in who was gonna pay market rate and is gonna spend, I think it's $1 million, right, on the property?
Yes, they were gonna spend more than that.
Okay, and then you have the other restaurateur, the chef, the famous chef, a lady, a very nice
Yes,
lady.
she's spending 1.5 million.
She's spending 1.5.
Senora Martinez.
Senora Martinez, and she's paying market rent. Again, at the end of the day, we are fiduciaries on behalf of the city, and I know we love everybody here, our friends at the Biltmore, our friends at the theater, but we have a responsibility to make sure these properties are not only being upkept, but that they're also, paying rent. I know for a fact that the cinema pays rent, correct?
Yes, a much reduced rent.
They pay reduced rent, but they pay rent. Somebody's got to pay rent. And now we're expanding the cinema potentially. For another year, we're extending the lease agreement with Patio and Things. Patio and Things, is my understanding, is paying a 6-figure rent.
They are a very good tenant, an
They're a
excellent
very good
tenant.
tenant. They always pay on time.
Yes.
We're going to remove them, but we're still making the cinema pay rent on the new space.
Yes, a fraction of that.
So we understand it's a great cultural institution, but they still have to pay. They have to have some skin in the game. Right? Okay. By the way, I sent an email this morning to my staff requesting that we pressure wash the Aragon parking garage at the top floor. It's looking a little bit shabby. We need to get on that, please.
So as we go down the list, we talked about Miracle Theater. The museum also has a request of $490,000, currently not recommending funding on that project. The Trolley Depot fueling station, you can see it slightly on the right-hand side, will be funded out of CITT funds, so it's eligible. It's about $91,000.
Can you do me a favor? Can you send to my colleagues on the commission and myself through the manager's office, what are the Coral Gables Museum repairs that are being requested and that we're not funding? I want to understand how critical those are.
Yes.
Yeah. Because I've been on that roof, by the way, with the director and Mr. Jose Valdez-Fali discussing issues, and they had some issues there with the roof. I know they repaired them, and they had other issues, but I want to make sure that if it's something that needs to be addressed, we need to add that to our priorities list to make sure it gets funded, because that's a city asset that I want to make sure that, again, we protect it at all costs.
Okay. We'll provide you a list of what's included in the 491.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that because,
Yes.
I have met with them. I've gone over the leaks. I'm sure you're aware of the communications that I had. I know we're waiting for some TDR money, funds to come in, and I
That's correct, and they're.
like the windows in this building and the leaks over there. I think these are priority items.
Yes, and that's correct. So there is a plan that we are anticipating some TDR monies to come in. Once the TDR monies come in, the plan is to put $1 million towards the museum. We don't have those yet, so the plan is not enacted, and so it's not reflected here, but once it is, that has been the plan.
Thank you.
Okay? Trolley Depot, 91,000, we talked about that. And so I'm going to go down. Remember, I'm going only through the projects that currently have fiscal year '24 requests. I'm actually going to expand the columns for a moment here, because I do want you to see that we're going to get into parks. And so while there is not 24 requests for many of these parks, there are future year requests, whether they, and you can see that on your sheet, whether they get funded in those future years also becomes a prioritization exercise for us, but just so that you can see that those are there. So Durango Park is one of those. The 81,000 in the current year would be for design, and the 25 funding would be for the full project. We are not currently funding that project or recommending funding. The same is true for Hammock Oaks Park. 66,000 would be for design, 500,000 would be for construction. Currently not projecting funding for those parks. You're going to see Merrick Park Improvements has some future year funding. Nothing for '24. Cooper and Moore Park enhancements, request for about $400,000. We're not currently recommending funding or proposing funding at this time for that park. Aduna Park enhancements, we have some requests for future years. Salcedo Park development, $128,000 in fiscal year '24. Currently not funding this project. But you will see that the next project is a significant funding, and it's $900,000 that we're funding. We do have a grant related to that project, and so the project is required to be done sometime mid-2025, and therefore we are recommending that we fund the project or give the grant back. We don't think that's a good idea, so we recommend funding the project. San Sebastian Park enhancements, we have an ask for about $780,000. We're currently not recommending funding for the park at this moment. I'm going to skip the next two. Citywide pickleball, this is a popular conversation. So this $2.9 million ask funds 13 to 16 courts throughout the city. This fully funds every court that anybody's ever talked about. Am I right, Fred?
This plan was one, if you recall, I presented it to commission with several different locations, and the direction was bring it back to us during funding as an entire plan. It includes a standalone facility and then improvements of additional courts in certain areas.
So, this is incredibly important. I love pickleball. I've never played pickleball. But
It's fun.
But I like the fact that it gets elderly people and people who are disabled and people who cannot work out for one reason or another, it gets them out to play a sport that brings community together. That's what I like about it. And I think it's just getting out there and sweating in one form or another and meeting your neighbor is critically important. But this is the good part about being an elected official, and I love it. Okay? How are we gonna fund this? Because we all get hundreds of emails from residents saying they want pickleball courts. So I need $3 million. Who has $3 million? Everybody, when they're campaigning, they're saying they're gonna do this, they're gonna get pickleball courts, they're gonna get that, they're robbing money at the city, where's this at? All this kind of stuff. All right, guys, I love how staff looks at me. They're like, I can't believe this guy's saying this on the record. I'm saying it on the record. $3 million. Who's got it? I'm looking.
I can't believe we just insulted all pickleball players by saying
I'm looking
they're all
for it.
disabled.
So,
No, I never said that. I said
by
that
the
a
way,
lot of.
think
I said
that
a lot of. I said a lot of. I said
There's
the
a
great-
lot of things that can be done. We just need to find ways to do it. As
Okay,
you've
but
been
that's
saying.
the politician
Creativity.
answer.
By the way, on
That's the politician
the
answer.
record, I support sweaty old people.
Yes.
I mean,
This is-
I think that's a good cause.
So my point was very simple. We have a $3 million ask. The emails are not going to stop. Figure it out. This is important. People want pickleball courts. Maybe we don't do $3 million at once. Maybe we address, for example, the pickleball courts at the Biltmore that we had a conversation about. We find out how many of those are. Maybe Fred can come back with his team and say, hey, commission, to do the pickleball courts at the following park, we'll start with one. It's 3 courts, 4 courts, this is the cost. And we try to tackle it this year.
In the email that we send you with the list of priorities that you identify, we also have a list, and I thought I had it in this book, but it's in a prior version of my notes, of what that 2.9 million, and we reviewed those in your one-on-one, what that 2.9 million gets you, what courts at what parks. And so you can then tell us in your response what priorities and what amount of funding you'd like to put towards that. At the moment, we don't have any funding identified towards pickleball park. Again, I will reiterate, just because there's nothing recommended here on our part does not mean that we have not heard your conversations, that we have not heard about the phone calls and the conversations at commission. And so it's not to take away from the need or the want. It's just we are prioritizing funding based on the conversations and priorities that we've heard from commission and staff.
Vice Mayor.
So I'm going to ask Fred to come back to us with the lowest cost locations to do it. We just need paint, a net.
We're done.
Okay.
All right. Next items, I know that the Vice Mayor has to go at 12, and so do I. I got to go to work.
Actually, I canceled
Oh,
my
you did?
lunch.
Well, I got to go to work, so
Yeah, but-
let's finish up.
Yeah, let's be efficient here.
Let's be efficient.
Right?
Yeah,
So
15
again,
minutes in, huh?
I'm not reviewing them, but there are parks that have future year requests, and we will talk about those in future years unless you come back and say, hey, you didn't talk about Coral Bay, and that's really a priority for me this year. So Rotary Park enhancements, $212,000. We are not currently funding that project. Youth Center improvements, we talked about this already. This is $500,000 towards design.
And that could include pickleball.
And I will give you a pickleball.
You heard me. See, I knew you'd come back.
I have
You'd
balls
come back, like Pavlov's.
and some rackets. I can play with somebody.
Yes, we could probably get a racket in there for each of you as well. Blue Road Open Space Improvement, so this is a project that also has a grant, and so we have to fund it for fiscal year '24. The park is also anticipated, per the grant timeline, to be completed fiscal year 2025, and so we would recommend funding that $498,000. JC enhancements, we have future year projects. Police body worn cameras, so this is also something that we have to do. We have grant funding towards this project, and so we're recommending funding for '24. We've moved on past the parks, but I do just want to highlight that between one item and another, and Mayor, you messed up my number, by, we have about,
It's his fault.
I got to do math, $6.7 million towards parks in the capital plan. So we have 1.8 in the matrix. We have currently 4 million going towards Phillips Park. We have 900,000 going towards Toledo, $500,000 towards Blue Road. That's a $6.2 million. And then we had some money going to land purchase, but we're going to take that away. And we have $500,000 going
And let's swing
towards
that,
the youth center design.
250 over to Burger Bob's, please.
Yes. And so just in context, right, because there's a lot of parks that we are not funding, we are putting a significant amount of dollars into parks. We can't fund everything in 1 year.
Can you do me a favor? On Manatee Overlook on 127, we don't need to spend $200,000, okay? That's a very simple patch of grass. Maybe we can just add 2 simple lights there, some grass, and two light benches, so that people can look at the manatees. Maybe while they're waiting for their children to get out of Coral Gables Senior High. Let's try to lower the scope on that. It's been there for a long time. It's an eyesore, and it's a beautiful little swath that could potentially be something nice. Plant 2 oak trees there. Do something nice that we could do for potentially
But we're gonna have to-
1/5 the cost.
We're gonna have to cut and irrigate grass, so
That's fine.
we may need a little.
Maybe we don't do
options.
grass. Maybe we'll do theirs some natural ground cover
Right.
or something. Can we get that scope? I mean, just as an eyesore as you're driving in that area. Maybe Dina can help us out and she could bring something to our attention. Just minimize it. Durango Park is the one. Let's use Durango Park as an example. Correct? The one adjacent on San Amaro. It's very simple. Has some ground cover, a few light benches, nothing crazy, maybe a light or 2. Which one is it? No, which is the one that's next to on San Amaro? Which one? Cepero Park, I'm sorry. Cepero Park. Maybe we can use as an example of something, a very simple passive park. It's nothing major. I would like to see that funded at one point in the next 2 years. Finally, we haven't done anything with it. We've been talking about it for some
Okay,
time.
we'll work with staff and see what the 200 entails and what they compare it down to.
Maybe we can do a design competition like we did with the students, and we could do something in-house instead of having to hire an architect and landscape architect. We could do something simple since it's such a small little piece of property.
Okay? So we've moved on past the parks. We hit the police body worn cameras. We talked about that has a grant, so that has to be funded. The next set, and I'm only going through those that have 24 requests, so if you have any questions on any other projects, you can always stop me. Police Mobile Command Unit, $95,000 request. We are currently not recommending funding based on our availability. Fire Station 3 Telecom Tower Replacement, again, $480,000, currently not recommended for funding in this next fiscal year. Emergency Vehicle Intersection Preemption System. I know that conversation has come up and that it is an important system. I know that we are also working to work out some logistics with the county and where they're at with it. So currently, we are not recommending funding for this project. Warehouse 1 repairs. This is over at the Public Station Yard, Public Works Yard. And so this is $180,000. We are currently not recommending funding for this. This is a location where some of our equipment is stored. Granada and Columbus Plaza transportation improvements, and so this project also has a small grant, and so we are recommending funding it at $100,000. Okay, so moving down to the projects with fiscal year '24.
So before you roll out of that, I'll just share with my colleagues, I've asked the city attorney to look at the asset forfeiture fund to the extent some of these items can be funded from there.
And they do. They do. The police is always looking to see, they are a good partner with us to see what they can fund out of those funds, but we can ask them again.
Yeah.
Cartagena Circle landscape improvements, $60,000. We're currently not funding this project. DeSoto Fountain Traffic Circle, $339,000. Currently not recommending funding for this project. Miracle Mile streetscape improvements. This is a project that we have been putting money into each year. We're currently not recommending any funding for '24. Giralda Avenue streetscape improvements, $180,000 and some funding in out years. Currently not recommending funding for this project. Ponce de Leon Boulevard streetscape improvements. We know that Ponce de Leon has been a focus in improving certain areas in Ponce de Leon, but we are currently not recommending additional funding. We have about $2.1 million in the prior year available. And so based on where we're at with available funding, we're not putting anything towards here this year. Ponce de Leon improvements, H Street to Flagler. You'll see that we have pushed that out to future years. It is a significant amount of money, 1.5 over 3 years. We're currently not funding that project for fiscal year '24. Ponce de Leon Park improvements, $427,000 in '24 and $1 million over the next 2 years. We're currently not recommending funding for '24 for this project. LED streetlight conversions, I'm sorry, I'm gonna keep going. That one doesn't have a '24 ask. Street end beautifications, $295,000. We are not currently funding that project in '24. And the last mile transit stop, I believe that this is funded out of CITT funds, and so that's being proposed to be fully funded next fiscal year. And the last one is, I'm sorry, Coco Plum street lighting. This is the second portion of the neighborhood for the replacement of the lights. This is a city contribution that we made for the first neighborhood, which was about half of this amount. And this is to cover essentially the cost of removing the lights. There is some cost saving project. There is cost savings to the neighborhood doing this project because they would be replacing the lights. However, we're not currently recommending funding. I don't know that the project is ready to start in '24. And so if those discussions continue and we have to, then we may recommend funding in future conversations.
Mr. Manager, would you be so kind to find out when the Coco Plum is going to be ready to potentially do this project? Because I worked on the first lighting project that took almost 5 years to get accomplished last year when we did it. And the cost savings to the city is a good one because we're not maintaining those lights. And I want to make sure that
Yes, we want to get out of the light business.
we want to get out of light business. So if we're I know it's 175,000, but you know when you look back after 3, 4, 5 years, you realize, thank God we're using our resources for something else, and we're
We
not
have
spending it.
a hurricane, the storm surge will wipe those out. and it'll be
let
ours.
FPNL take that responsibility.
So we are getting rid of that because the new tariff by the Public Service Commission
Is up.
has made that a very good deal for us to get out of the poll business. However, my understanding with Mr. Siegel is they're not quite ready for it right now.
But let's track that, please.
But I would like to, yes, I told him that if we change the lighting, it would be through the new tariff procedures with FPNL.
Just makes him aware that if he doesn't move, we're not going to get in this budget cycle. So it'll be next year's budget. I don't want to have anybody disappointed. Okay?
So,
Anything else?
quick question.
So the last, sorry?
Oh, okay.
The last one is Commodore Trail Rehabilitation, and that is a tentative interlocal agreement that we're anticipating for $250,000 in GOB bonds. And so if that does come through, that project will move forward, and that's where that funding is coming from. And just to kind of sum up, I want to go back through the conversation of general capital available funding is currently estimated about $23.4 million. You can see here that we've allocated, based on the projects that we've talked about today, all of that $23.4 million of the $62 million in asks. So I'm just going to hide the rest of the columns. We all know that the funding is coming from various places for the remainder of the $42,000 of that $60,000 that we are currently recommending funding for. And you see that the total of projects that we have not proposed any funding for is about $20 million. And so we will continue to refine our recommendations based on revenues that we see coming in or are balancing through the budget process. Our July 1 number will be slightly different, but not significantly different as to what's available for capital. But we will continue to try and address those priorities that you've discussed And so this is where we land, and so if there's any other direction you'd like to give us,
Quick question.
we're happy to hear it.
The last mile transit stop that's being funded by CITT money,
Yes.
those are the trolley stops that we made an ask of the Florida legislature for as well?
Yes, those are the trolley stops.
Okay. So that may get some additional revenue?
The
And we'll
CITT funds, we try to use one-time money towards towards capital projects.
Right.
And the recurring revenue is used towards the operating. The last mile is a specific project, which is funded.
I'm just trying to make sure that I'm understanding that those are the trolley stops.
Yes.
Okay. That covers, that we still need to.
Yes, that is the last mile project, is the trolley
Okay.
stops.
I have a, sorry,
So,
so real quick question. Since I saw traffic circle yesterday, we had a long discussion about the proposed circle for Anderson and Crowway. We have circles everywhere, roundabouts. I've stayed on the record how I think two-lane circles or roundabouts are accidents waiting to happen or happening. Do we have a plan, I don't know if it's Hermes, on maintaining, improving, repairing those, or now many circles and roundabouts in the city? Do we have something focused on those things?
Well,
as
while you
opposed-
walk up, I'm going to add to that, the paint is terribly worn.
The paint on which one, I'm
The
sorry?
paint on these circles, San Amaro and Segovia Circle.
The
terribly-
striping.
The striping.
Okay.
So that might help keep drivers in our lanes a little more.
So I think Dina, one of her asks was for the, because we also have some circles that predate the new program. And I think part of it is we're going to be refreshing those up.
I'm talking about, the
sorry?
paint. The painted lines are all eroded.
Right, the first question was about the landscaping, and yes,
Well, not even landscaping, just,
Right.
whatever repairs are needed
right.
to maintain it. Like, I guess we maintain any other.
That will have to come from the resurfacing funding that we have right now, striping and we have the street resurfacing project, and because the circles are ours, so that'll be the only thing. Because the county, generally speaking, they will be responsible for striping, so that's where I see that money coming from.
okay. Any other comments?
But we'll take a look at those.
Any other comments? Pam, do we have anything else that we need to discuss?
So I just want to make sure there's nothing else for your list. So the email that I will be sending out to follow is the list of priorities that you identified. So the diner, the new sidewalks, and the trash pits. I did not hear.
And also add their Rotary Park, please, which is in dire straits. Dire straits.
And we will work with staff on Manatee Park, but that will not be part of that list. And we will also send you the list of pickleball
Yes.
courts that are included in that.
You can include that in, that's also,
2.9.
that's also a priority, also included in that email.
Right.
So I would like a breakdown on prioritizing the windows, even if we do start at the top floor. We're talking about this city hall.
Add that to our list of priorities, the windows.
Break it down, even if we do a floor a year, starting at the top where the water can then bleed down into the rest of the walls and the floors below, we got to start somewhere.
So for the purpose of my email this week, I am going to list that as a priority. I don't know that I will have detailed information on the cost of windows and a project, but I will have that as a follow-up item for staff and the manager.
So if we could, through the manager, let's start working on getting, through a consultant, window prices for different materials, so that the commission can understand what are the prices to achieve hardening in this structure.
Mayor, we're working on that right now.
Okay, so let's make that a priority, see if we can get it done, maybe after summer, as we work through the
We have
budget.
pretty much eliminated everything except steel. We're getting steel prices now, so we can match the existing mullions as close as possible, existing historical design.
And I would like examples of similar buildings, for example, Miami High, other buildings, potentially in Naples, Fort Myers, areas like that have historic buildings at city halls, that we could potentially see what they did when they replaced the windows. I want to see what's recommended. Maybe get a historic preservation consultant who will tell us, look, Vince, this is what I've seen done in other buildings to mimic the look of
We
wood.
will be working with our historical director on that. We looked at various alternatives. They did not match the profiles very well. So in order to match these profiles, we are going to have to go to steel, and we're working with the steel similar to what they did at Miami High.
Okay.
And
Anything else from my colleagues on the commission? Yes, go ahead.
I left off the list the AEDs, so that'll be also on the list. And so just keep in mind, we're going to send this email out to you. For our July 1 book, we will have a number similar to that 23 million that we have identified as available for capital in our July 1 book. This is a plan. We can refine it over the summer, but any information that we receive over the next week or so is what will get contemplated in July 1. After that, we will have an estimated budget, and then through the summer, we will work on it, which will be adopted after the first and second hearing in September.
And what I would like for you to do for me, please, is I would like for you to track how we move money around.
Certainly.
Okay, I want it to be transparently placed on the website. For example, Mayor Lago took, at the request of the commission, $250,000 from the parks line item, the purchasing of land, and he moved it to Burger Bob's to fund that project. And the commission agreed, disagreed, what were the comments? I want to move that line, and as we continue to do that, we start funding and taking money away from projects, and we start receiving text messages. Yes, I have gotten text messages. You can do more public records requests on me every day. And we move in that direction. I want to make sure that people understand, because residents and business owners are all calling us right now. There's, hey, fund my project, fund my project, fund my project. I want to make sure it's clear and transparent how we were able to get to what we got,
Absolutely.
how we delivered. Are
Certainly.
there any other comments from my colleagues in the commission? I'm going to leave you with a quote, okay, from probably the most important boxer in history. His name was Joe Louis. If you're a history buff, you'll know this quote. Ready?
Bomber.
The Bronx Bomber. Very well said. Everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die. Research that quote, and you understand what is the meaning behind that quote and why it applies to today's meeting. Thank you to staff. Thank you to the manager. Thank you to everybody who had a hand in today's presentation. Our finance director, you did an incredible job. The team who presented today, my colleagues in the commission, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
God bless.